the early 70s. Those came to an end in 73. So you let loose finance and finance capital, and you decoupled your currency from, hard sources, so it's now floating. And you create this thing where, there's all of a sudden you're starting to give people credit. That didn't happen before. Mm-hmm. That didn't happen when I was a kid. To have a credit card was nobody had a credit card. They just didn't exist. Except for the very rich people in business who needed them. But everybody else was like, pay your own way. And then all of a sudden, poof, all this credit, all this money. And of course, we have all this money now, so I want my taxes back, is the great refrain.
If only.
I want my country back. I don't want to pay taxes. The government does not deserve our money. The government can't do anything right. Look at what they're doing. They're screwing up all the schools by busing and racial integration. They're a pain in the ass to deal with because they're a big bureaucracy. There's so much waste in the Pentagon. Oh my God, how much waste in the Pentagon, and we keep giving them more money.
Good old Reaganomics.
While they actually keep giving them more money.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's absurd.
That's one thing I always wish that small government, free market, conservative types would tell me. It's like, can you describe to me what size of government is? Is it just social spending? Is it military budget? Because it's very rare you'll have someone say within the same breath, yeah, we need to cut social spending and the military budget.
Yeah, what's the who is it that said, I want government to be small enough I can drown it in the bathtub? It's the guy that went around with the no
Grover
taxes.
Norquist.
Yeah, the no taxes guy.
That guy, he is one of the most, I would say, evil people to walk this country's streets.
It blows my mind. He said he came up with that no tax pledge when he was 10 years old. Can you imagine?
Yeah,
what a nerd.
How fun.
Imagine being so unpopular that you had no friends as a kid, and instead you were thinking about how to starve the government. What kind of a childhood is that, man?
Him and Paul Ryan.
That's the person you shove in a toilet and give them a swirly.
These kids out here with their Sega Genesis, I'm trying to increase dividends. I'm thinking about austerity.
He gave rise to Ben Shapiro, who stopped learning everything at 12 years old.
Can you imagine him at Halloween time
really?
at 10
Ben
years
Shapiro
old?
said that?
No, I said Ben Shapiro stopped learning anything at 12 years old.
I got you.
He already knew everything.
He clearly didn't learn how to properly structure a sentence. Have you guys ever looked at the... I think it's Behind the Bastards is the podcast. They do readings of pieces of his books. It's True Freedom or something like that is his book. He really needs to go back and maybe take a couple of liberal arts courses and learn how to properly structure sentences, because it's bad.
Yeah, there's a reason why they kicked him out of Hollywood when he was trying to be a screenwriter. I'm pretty sure that was one of them.
It does feel a lot of conservatives within media are just mad that they couldn't make it in Hollywood, because they do have a very reactionary worldview, and that doesn't sell within Hollywood. So they're just mad about it, and now that's their only politics, is getting back at Hollywood.
Yep, a lot of them live in California, man. A lot of them live in California, and they don't have any policies, right? So it's all just reactionary feeling, just like a
culture war.
Exactly. And they pump that, and it's it's just odd that a lot of them live in California, and yet this is commune California to them, it's just...
Yeah, California.
Yeah, it's very odd.
Well, I mean,
There's
Ben
also
moved to Nashville.
Oh,
There's also
he
a
did
Hollywood
Daily Wire.
to QAnon pipeline.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Speaking of Hollywood to Q pipeline, I mean, I know Marcus, Dr. Buenabuen, and Professor Q were in my chat yesterday when I was on a panel debating some groypers.
God.
That was painful.
It was painful. Believe me, I was in the hot seat. It was worse for me. when they were doing their outros, plugging all their materials, they were like, we stream on this platform and this one because Twitch doesn't like us talking about these issues. And I was like, I wonder why. And then the dude goes, yeah, tomorrow we'll be talking about Hollywood blood rituals. And I was like, oh well, there you go.
God, I missed that. Really?
Oh, man.
Like, they really fucking said that. Oh
Yeah.
my God,
Yeah.
dude.
Mayo, I think is his name.
What's your guys' adrenochrome protocol? What's your
Yeah, Greg, that's where we come in. We have to synthesize it in the laboratory.
What's your
They hand us the newborns and we do the rest.
what's your proteomics? Like, how are you
Yeah, what does a liquid chromatography column look like for like anion capture for adrenochrome? Like,
Let me, 1 second, my GCMS. 1 second.
Oh,
one second.
man.
Oh, y'all really went inside baseball with that one.
Oh, dude. By the way, Marcus, I got a story. My grad student beats your grad student, dude. I got a story today. I can't wait to tell you, but it's like it's deep, dude. It's deep, but it's bad. It's bad.
Yeah.
oh god. Go ahead,
Did
come
anyone
on.
have any takeaways since? Because I like afterwards when I was editing the video down to post it, I was just kind of scrolling through my chat logs to see what the vibes were, kind of like how everybody was receiving it. Like now that you had time to like let that brain rot kind of dilute in your gray matter, does anyone have any takeaways from that conversation?
I don't have a takeaway, but I do have a question.
Okay.
So I've watched a number of these debate streams now, and I'm really trying to wrap my head around like what the end goal, like what's the ultimate goal? Because I have some opinions and thoughts, but I guess I should go to the source. So here you are.
Okay, so like you, I have been like following this scene, not like super closely, but there was a time where I wanted to do a very in-depth, I don't know, video essay or maybe like write an article about it, about what this kind of subculture is about, kind of the cultural staples of it. And when it comes down to what the goals of it are, it kind of varies person to person, but ultimately I think there are a handful of things that you can find in all these groups. 1, clout. 2, you want the own, the dunk, which is basically a clip of you like belittling, embarrassing someone in the marketplace of ideas. And the most good faith person, I think, wants to show how ridiculous this ideological opponent's worldview is, break down their arguments, and then restructure a counterpoint to show you don't know what you're talking about. You're a bad faith actor, and you're doing your viewers a disservice. They should come to me. The goal is like audience migration to kind of like parasitically suck away some of their people. And if you're a good faith person, then you would hope to de-radicalize and then, depending on your worldview, re-radicalize those people into like leftism, in my case. So it's kind of those three things, but a lot of it is blood sport.
Yeah, I agree. I think there is an important aspect though, that especially with YouTube and where everything is searchable now with keywords and stuff like that. I mean, it's important to have, like, for example, when we were talking about Ben Shapiro. So if someone searches Ben Shapiro video, it's important to have that like counter that's saying that this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, and this is why in that search algorithm. Otherwise, like, people aren't getting exposed to those ideas.
Yeah,
and hate watching is a thing. You can hate watch,
Yes.
and we're using those algorithms that push this far right, this crazy alt right stuff so quickly on the internet and through YouTube and Facebook and stuff. I think the idea is to kind of take apart that narrative and push it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is certainly a thing. Hate watching is a interesting aspect of the live streaming. I mean, even just the segmented, clipped content on YouTube. I don't quite understand it. I think there's very much a parasocial aspect to it, where people think that somehow me coming into someone's chat and typing in like 1488, the Jews run the media, and then dip, that somehow like that's going to like wreck that person's platform. I don't know what the deal is. I mean, we had somebody just earlier do that in my chat.
Huh.
Like, what's happening? Like, what do you think is going to happen here?
Yeah.
So that same night, just last night, right? There's another streamer I watch from the QAnon Anonymous podcast.
Oh, great podcast.
And he called in to a QAnon influencer, and it was interesting. And he has a little bit of a different approach when he does that. But anyway, the point he was trying to make was the people on the right have the same view that the people on the left do, that look at these dumb people, like, you know, and he called it the looking glass effect, which I thought was kind of interesting to think about it that way. And I don't know, to me, it just, I keep coming back to this, like, question of, like, how do we fix this problem? Because clearly I think it's a problem, and how we kind of, fix it.
I mean, I think at least for people who are on the left, more empathy for sure. But there is, I think the expectation for everyone to approach each person that comes in their chat or wants to like come onto Discord and, debate some topic, to say that person has to approach every interaction with the most empathy possible is a big ask. It's too much to ask.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to, and I had a brief discussion with James from the internet, another lefty streamer and journalist, about this, how I wanted to like get a couple like larger lefty streamers together, talk about like margins of acceptability and like who we should engage with. And they were like, well, that's how we start eating each other. I was like, okay, well, there is a point to be made about that. However, I think that particularly like I don't know if you're familiar with the space, Greg, on Twitch, but there's like the Hippy Dippy Round Table.
Oh yeah,
it's a big one. Yeah, like Hake from the Hake Report or Fabian Liberty. Like these people are like, this is very inside baseball. Like these people are like below any kind of standard that I think like a reasonable person would have for a discussion. Because there's nothing that's going to come out of that. Like last night, had I known that those people were that bad, I wouldn't have done that. Because there was nothing that was coming out of it. These guys were talking about like green-haired dragons and like the
lizard
fake
people?
country of.
Woo!
Yeah.
Wait, really?
Lizard people. They still
I missed that
exist.
part.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
man.
like we kept saying like because it's the guy on the panel kept trying to like gauge our worldview by engaging in hypotheticals, but the hypotheticals made like no sense. We were like, that's not how this type of like I propose to you a scenario, and I want to see like what your moral axioms are like. Well, like he wasn't doing it properly, and we were trying to explain that to him, and then he started talking about like, okay, well, here's an example. If a green-haired person like was fighting a dragon and you were the only person that could save it, like, would you do it? And I'm like, what are you talking about?
What the fuck?
I mean, no one said racists were smart.
That's true. Yeah, this is very strange. I don't know. There is a certain like psychopathy, I think, that exists in this space where people only engage with people through text or through Discord, and there is a certain level of humanity that is lacking in it.
Agreed.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think that if you talk to people, it's rarely the caricature that you're portrayed in memes or whatever like that. It's usually a lot deeper. I spend a lot of time in communities that I vehemently disagree with. Like when Trump was rising in 2015, like I was like, this guy's a fascist. It's so obvious to me. So the first thing I did was try to get into Trump circles somehow, if I could try to understand like what's going on, just to try to ask these people.
Was to get right in there with the Trump.
I know it's I don't know what it is. I think that the internet is such an interesting force of like trying to understand other people's worldviews that you don't have access to, and I don't have those people in my life, so I kind of just naturally have always reached out to differing people, different ideas,
Are you sure you don't want to be a sociologist?
Professor Q, I really want to talk to you about conspiracy at some point, but yeah, with this stuff, with the anti-vax stuff, my first inclination was the same thing, like the No New Normal subreddit and that kind of stuff. I've jumped in there, and I had, like, on their Discord, I actually talked to the moderator and the head mod, and he was like all about free speech. So I had my own science channel on Discord on their No New Normal like conspiracy thing for like months, like 3 or 4 months, and they tried to get me banned on there multiple times, and eventually it was like 6 times, like 6 different times. The guy was like, okay, this is too much. And that's actually, Marcus, how I found you guys, is because Hoomstadiv DM'd me, and he was like, dude, why are you spending so much time in anti-vax Discords? Like, how did you not get banned like within the first week, by the way, answering all those science questions? And he's like, why don't you hang out with like science people though? And I'm like, well, sure.
Yeah, I mean, both is a good approach. Like,
Yeah.
I think there are too few people doing what you're doing, or maybe were past tense doing in those places, right? Because a lot of why those places exist is because, science and scientists don't do a great job at interfacing with people who are scared or hesitant or just have questions in general. Like, it's not very accessible. So your presence ultimately makes the science more accessible, and hopefully had some effect on sort of de-radicalizing people out of that space, and maybe hopefully transitioning them elsewhere, maybe like a pharmacy to get a vaccine, for example.
Yeah, I mean, these conversations are so, I mean, they're detached from reality so often that you're never going to be able to rationalize someone back into like what's going on in that conversation. But there's a couple of times, like, for example, I was talking to him on Discord. 2 big wins I guess I had was one person like telling them that there's a difference between SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19. Like, they didn't realize that that was a difference, and like actually telling them that. So that was cool, using the HIV and AIDS analogy. And then the other one was this guy that had his conspiracy was that every science lab in the entire world was all conspiring together. PCR was fake. All this stuff was fake. And I was like, well, I work in a lab, man. Do you think I'm in on it? Like, I'm a scientist. He's like, no, I think you're one of the good ones. And I'm like, all right, dude.
I mean, actually, wait a second. Turn your head to the left. I think I see some green scales coming through.
Exactly. I was like, you know what? If that guy thinks that he knows one scientist that's in the world that's not in this global conspiracy, then I won, kind of thing. So,
yeah, it's funny that you break it down like that, because I had a conversation with we'll just say a social conservative who was big on like the CRT thing, and I was like, well, my wife's a teacher. Like, do you think that, like, and her, like, how little time she has to do her regular job. Do you think that they really have time to like educate people on like anti-racism and indoctrinate them into homosexual Marxism? And he was like, well, no, but it's all over the place. And I was like, show me 2 things.
Yeah, humanizing the viewpoint. I think it's just like important.
I think that is like the biggest weapon that if we can cater our rhetoric around is emotional appeal, because there's no appeals to authority. There's no, empirical evidence, because, social conservatism and reactionary politics are anti-empiricism. It relies on a praxeological view of the world. True. So it's just emotional appeals is like our greatest sword that we have at our, arsenal.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Some empirical research that supports that, by the way. One of my professors recently published an article where he analyzed the Daily Stormer and a bunch of others, I think 4chan, and his conclusions were that basically emotional appeals were what won these people over to the far right. And so I think there's a lot of wisdom potentially in what you say.
Yeah.
I read some. There was like a cult. I feel like a lot of some of this stuff is very cult like. I don't know. And a lot. I was reading some paper about deprogramming some people, and it's kind of like it's not an appeal to authority. It's an appeal from like people that they trust and that know them. They can kind of be like, "Yo, Joe, like, dude, you've gotten you've changed, man. You know what I mean? Like you've like really changed. What's going on, kind of thing. You know, like I've known you for 20 years. Now I'm like in this NWO conspiracy. Like that doesn't make any sense, kind of thing. The problem is that like as streamers or content producers, we're not in those circles, but maybe like these conversations can inspire people to kind of like reach out if they're capable of, right? It's like a whole mental health ability to kind of reach out and talk to these people and try to deprogram them, I feel like. And that's it's not easy.
You should definitely reach out to another streamer I've been who was on that panel I was on last night, Mythic Politics. He's writing a book on conspiracy theories right now.
Oh, cool. Oh, I will.
Yeah, and Professor Q, of course.
Yeah. It's just always been really interesting to me, you know, the conspiracy, because I'm anti-conspiratorial in my thinking. You know, it's just kind of like a very unlikely scenarios that these people, and I mean conspiracy, like, let's define the term as in like there are secret cabals and groups of people working together behind the scenes in order to do something. It's just, yeah, it's not been my experience.
Yeah. Do you mind me? I don't know if you don't want to dox yourself, but do you mind me asking where you're at in the country?
Yeah, I'm in Southern California.
Okay. Do you feel like you experience in your day to day a lot of that worldview? Because like California, big state, there are pockets of like conspiracy minded people and like social conservatives, but by and large, people are generally pretty liberal.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. The people that I converse with like every day, they're not gonna like want to talk about these subjects, even if they do feel these, like they don't feel like they're, they want to bring it up, kind of thing. I just,
you don't see a lot of Q stickers on the back of cars.
I know nobody in my life I would consider a close friend that would be in QAnon or anything like that, and it's just.
What a dream.
I just don't want to be in a bubble, and I tell that to the people the anti-vax people. I'm like, thanks for helping me not like live in a bubble, because I wouldn't know this stuff otherwise, so. Yeah.
What's like, were you ever surprised by any talking points that they would use where you were like, whoa, that's okay. Didn't think of that one.
That's a good question, man. It matters the subject. I guess with the QAnon, the anti-vax stuff specifically, that's what I've kind of like been immersed in recently. Like how big the conspiracy goes, where it's just like there's, especially with with QAnon, like Trump is like this fighter and mythical figure. The best definition of QAnon that I've found, by the way, is the founder of 4chan. He was like, QAnon is the fan fiction for why Trump never did the things that he said he was going to do. I was like, damn, that's so true.
Wow,
so true.
That's fucking good.
I know, isn't it? Like you can get into like the adrenochrome and all that kind of stuff, but like in reality, it's like it's them making up excuses, right? So, but like Trump is pro-vaccine, man. Like that's what's crazy. It's like how is he a double agent now? So you get that, right? You get the like, oh, he's anti-vax, but he's pro-vax, so that he can be anti-vax, and then he gets into the presidency, and then he gets the anti-vax legislation through or something like that. But I guess in general, it's just the thing that really blows me away as a scientist is that someone can like doubt like a whole method is false, like a PCR is fake. That one blows my mind, because it's like, dude, like you put the enzymes in there and you put the DNA in there and it literally just happens. Like I don't know what to tell you, kind of thing. It's just I've done millions of PCRs. I used to do automated robots and literally do, I used to do 20,000 PCRs a week, and it's like for that all to be fake, like what's in those tubes, man? Like what's going on?
Oh, but keep in mind too, like they don't have the education to necessarily understand what that is, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Exactly. That just means they didn't choose to become a scientist, which is fine. That's totally valid. But to them, it's all magical Democrat sorcery that they're doing in test tubes with people in white coats, depending on who you're talking to. So like we have our perspective, right? We know what we do.
Yeah.
It's always the challenge of helping other people come to a reasonable understanding that isn't as like overtly technical as ours as to what we actually do. So that way it sort of demystifies this whole idea of, there are a bunch of government-funded scientists just working away in some deep state laboratory, cranking out adrenochrome to put into Joe Biden so he can walk up to a podium and like do a sanction or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you have to make people realize that science is a very real, tangible thing, and that people can do it. Like it, depending on what you do, sometimes it involves like doing stuff by hand or manipulating something directly that you can see the result of. So I think this goes back to our philosophy seminar, right? Like there's value in the senses or observing somebody else doing something. Like it helps make it less abstract.
What's your thoughts, Dr. Bwin?
I'm amazed at the patience y'all have to listen to these people. I mean,
a little masochistic, to be honest with you.
I'm like, what? Huh?
Yeah.
It doesn't, I mean, just the whole thing is so, I mean, it's one thing to like have kind of folk beliefs, like, if the woman is pregnant and she's carrying high, then it's going to be a girl. Or if she's carrying low, it's going to be a boy. That type of thing, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Very aware.
Adrenochrome and PCR tests and tying all of that together with lizard people. It's like what? What kind of story is
real
this?
Special with like interdimensional vampire pedophiles, like all working in Hollywood. Yeah, you can get real deep with it.
Oh my gosh, that's like
it's like put it where it belongs, in the fiction category. And if you like your fiction a little bit horror, a little bit sci-fi, then you pick it up and you read it and you enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
But to worship a politician who wants to be everything to everybody, like every single con man that ever existed, and worship him as some kind of leader, whilst going around with all this stuff. That, I'm sorry, but I just don't. It is also absurd to me. It's just so absurd. It's beyond absurd.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why do I need to entertain this absurdity? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, I think that's almost like, not like you in particular, but sort of that general like mindset from people in charge of like, oh, this is just over the top ridiculous. Like, why should we even bother interfacing with this? And then they start like bringing AR-15s to pizza parlors and stuff like that. And then we kind of have to like take stock of like, okay, maybe this is something we have to wrestle with because people are taking concrete action, maybe even taking lives based on it. As we all collectively recognize, it's so detached from reality that we can recognize it as invalid, but that doesn't stop people from thinking it is valid and acting on it. And I think that's maybe part of what drives a lot of us to like interface with it and listen to it and try and understand where it's coming from, because we have witnessed how this craziness can just manifest into massive amounts of direct and almost collective action, depending on who you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think
it's kind of Schrodinger's Alex Jones, where there's a fine balance to walk of, if we open this box and we start engaging with this material, are we lending it legitimacy? Is, somebody going on nightly news talking about, well, here's why QAnon is ridiculous. Is that going to play into the conspiratorial thinking of the people who follow this? And now they're going to say like, oh, they're onto us now. We need to double down because the deep state is fighting against us. This means that we're on the right path, brothers. It's. I wish people would view Alex Jones the way that like I do, where he's like a hilarious figure within media that doesn't need to be taken seriously, but is also very entertaining.
Yeah.
Oh man, we used to sit around and like do stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Like
And
people look at J. Jonah Jameson in comics and they're like, well, this is clearly a caricature. But then they look at someone who just does that and they're like, well, that's my guy.
Yeah. I think I kind of look at them too, like as being exploited and taken advantage of, and like not as in like a savior kind of thing, like I'm trying to save them, but just trying to like, like for example, I try to look democratically for egalitarian purposes, and you know, if I personally believe like in universal health care, and that would be people that wouldn't vote for, you know, the politicians that I support. That would be in universal health care would by definition include everyone. So that would include racists and the Nazis and all those crazy people too. And it's like, as a way that hopefully that they can see some humanity in other people and then start deprogramming that, you know, it's, you know, yeah.
Well, you said it before. You all said it before. It's like getting to know another person, right? On it, and having a one-to-one kind of relationship with them. That is something that the gay community did starting back in the 80s, because we were, you know, being decimated by AIDS. A lot of gay men were, I mean, an entire generation is just gone. And we started pushing for marriage equality because of the struggles that we had with our illness and, you know, being discriminated against and not having any legal protections. And so the strategy was you come out to your family, you come out to your siblings, you come out to your cousins and your aunts and uncles, and you come out to everybody you know. You get to know, you get them to know you as a gay person. And that'll break down the stereotypes that they have in their head. The absurdities and the you know, all gay men are rapists and it's all perversion and, you know, whatever they imagine in their, you know, weird fantasies about gay people.
Yeah.
And you come out to them and you show them a human face, just like you guys said. That's what we did. And if that's going to work for you, you know, you guys have a lot more patience than I do at this point.
I mean,
and I'm just amazed by it because I just really can't. I can't put up with that absurdity. It's just.
I don't think it's on everybody to do it either.
Exactly. Different strategies, like the dirtbag left and like Chapo Trap House exists and all that kind of stuff. And I that's totally fine. And that's good. But it's just me. And it's just like kind of what I've done since I've started being on the internet in like 1998, where I just kind of like naturally just like talking to people. I like to converse like, hey, like you've lived a completely different life than I have. So what have you learned?
Yeah, I mean, like, there's so many different flavors of. I mean, I'm like the politics person on the panel usually, so that's kind of like the lens through which I view things. Within the politics space, at least, I don't know how this would be in academia. You know, you have media figures, you have, you know, professors, you have writers and people who are working within like governments on science policies and research. But within the politics space, at least, you have video essayists, you have journalists, podcasters, debate bros, political commentators. There's a lot of like paths for the de-radicalization. And I think each one has its own skill set, and each one also kind of intersects with another. What happened?
Monkey W.
Oh. But yeah, like it's not on everybody to take on like, okay, well, we have to debate this person. Like, no, you don't.
Agreed.
And it's not on everybody to make a 45-minute, super high quality, very well written video essay. You know, play to the strengths that you have and recognize that, you know, you're only human, and you know, approach these things with as much empathy as you can, I guess.
Agreed.
That's one of my test questions on my exam. Not about empathy being a sociological tool.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's
I
like,
will say though.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's like my first inclination too is like fight fire with fire. You know, get you know, like that's like I think that's everyone's like natural, or maybe I can just speak for me. You know, that it's just my natural like but then it's just like after that, then it's like okay, let's like learn something.
Yeah, I always try to remember the Fred Hampton line. We're not going to fight fire with fire. We're going to fight fire with water. We're not going to fight capitalism with black capitalism. We're going to fight capitalism with socialism and solidarity.
Good one.
You know, but I do think there is an argument to be made that controlled burns have their place. But what I was going to say a moment ago was to the Dr. Bunawin's question, like, I don't know how people do this. Like, if you watch me closely in the thing I did last night where I got angry and then I like just kind of forgot my emotions and just went into a zone, kind of like found my zen. Like, that's
Oh
what I
yeah,
say.
you were out for blood. It was yeah.
Yeah. I hate when people just straight up lie. Like, and it's the lack of empiricism that frustrates me, because I kept saying, like, do you have a study? Do you have any polling? Do you have anything to bring to this other than your fifis? Like, no, of course not.
Yeah, you can tell when someone's like not acting in good faith in a conversation and has no intention of learning, and it's really frustrating because it's just like, okay, well, this is not going to be productive for either of us. So
Yeah, but you've like committed to yourself to like an hour and a half of doing this, and you don't want to be the person that walks out on it because look, that's a clip of you like being like, okay, well, fuck this, it's gonna start circulating, and then you get 30 groypers in your DMs being like, pussy.
So I have two takeaways from your conversation yesterday, Grimlow.
Okay.
And because it was in the background, and every once in a while I would turn it up and listen a little bit more closely, but it was mostly in the background. The first takeaway is, it's an echo of what I said before. Here we are talking about completely made up categories of people, and pretending that we're, saying something when we create these absurd hypotheticals about them. So it's absurdity on top of absurdity, and it's supposed to be meaningfully productive.
An Ouroboros of delusion.
Yeah, something like that. And the other thing I took away from it was James's comment about slapping the sandwich out of someone's hand.
Mm-hmm.
Because I heard them speak once, and I was like, oh my God, he's goddamn right. It's like slapping a sandwich out of a child's hand. It really, so those are the two big takeaways I got from yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, that's perfect, and it really is. I really wish that I don't know if it's like a senior high school level education that we need to do this, but I do think that Umberto Eco's that 14 points of war fascism, like, it needs to be required reading at this point.
I agree.
Like,
yeah.
if people aren't able to recognize the kinds of mental processes that lead to these, this point of view, and aren't able to say, oh, that's they're doing that, then
honestly, I think it's
point it out. I don't know.
14 points. 14 points is a little too much.
You think so?
Yeah. Robert Paxton has 4 points.
Oh,
that might work better.
That's
Robert
huge
Paxton,
efficiency huge efficiency gain there.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
they can call it efficiency, right? People have so much that they can keep in their brain at any one time.
Yeah.
And
it's a good point.
Handling 4 things is easier than 14.
Yeah, I think it's easy to like disengage. It's easy to like laugh people off, but at some point, like, we have to engage with people that we don't agree with, especially if we want to get anything done politically, especially if we want to actually make movement on anything, because none of us live in a world where everyone agrees with everyone else 100%. So we have to, like, when you reach out and you have to start talking to people, seeing what their needs are. What can we do? I had it with the student union that I organized with. I had it with City Hall, organizing with them. Like, it's at some point you just got to talk to people, and it can be awkward, and sometimes you can tell when is and you can see this with canvassing. This is actually a really popular thing. Like, when do you know someone's going to be unproductive, and just kind of like write it off? It's a 0. Write it down as a 0 so nobody else goes to it, and move on and try not to have it impact your day.
Yeah.
The other day when I was talking about interacting at the micro level and macro level, being a player in the game and playing the game and pushing the football around or whatever ball around, and also being aware of the rules of the game and the referees and all that. I think it's time to start. I mean, it's all well and good that you're out there playing on the field. I just want to recommend that you start working the refs, like they started doing in the 80s with Reagan, and do the same thing. Work the refs, call the refs out on their bullshit in spreading this stuff, and attack the institutions there.
So in the example of, say, QAnon, who would be our refs that we need to be calling out?
Who's amplifying it?
Multiple people.
Marjorie Taylor Greene would be one ref.
I'd say Facebook,
the refs.
the algorithm, that kind of stuff. It's all algorithm driven. I've come to the conclusion, and this is actually a Folding Ideas video, and his Flat Earth, another conspiracy video. he made such a good point that QAnon is basically built, and all the conspiracy, like there's what it is, and then the conspiracy of QAnon is actually built by the algorithms, because you have maybe 1,000 different ideas out there, but then only 2 or 3 will actually get pushed up above the fray. And the algorithm is what chooses that. They choose what the narrative is, and then now all of a sudden, what Q knows is what the 3 top things are, and now everyone knows that, and then 1,000 more points get put up. So
yeah, it was a crowdsourced, what you call it, conspiracy theory, right?
It's very true.
Almost a grassroots conspiracy theory.
It feels like, yeah, it does feel like that, but I do like try and be very cautious of using that term for a lot of the right-wing stuff, because there is always institutional power that has its roots in this kind of stuff. So it's grassroots on the algorithmic level, I think, but it's in its real world applications, like Unite the Right, January 6th, like the very extreme externalities of these conspiracy theories, that is 100% astroturfed. Trucker convoy, excellent example.
Oh, such a good one. Yeah.
Have you guys been paying attention to the trucker convoy?
I love them.
Number one trucker convoy stream. Homozygote.
Yeah.
Like,
We have one.
Yeah, we were trying to find the working channels, man. We got the app working and everything, but all the channels were just moderator only. I wanted to play so much
lame.
Ram Ranch, but I couldn't.
It's just
So
You
They've
sad.
guys
been
have,
talking.
Go ahead.
There's a Twitch channel that is broadcasting the live stream of it, and I tuned in, and you can hear the Zello. What is it? Zello?
Yeah, Zello.
Yeah, Zello channels, and they were talking about Ram Ranch and how they were like,
I like it
God
now.
damn it!
I like it actually. It's actually a good song.
I must be out of the loop on this one. What is Ram Ranch?
Oh, just
Oh
So,
man!
the
play
only
it on
song
stream.
I could-
Play it on stream.
yeah, it's what the Rolling
don't
Stone
do it.
described
Don't
as corn metal.
Okay.
Yeah.
You just have to hear it to realize for yourself. Like, it's a shit post. It's basically just
Yeah.
a 7-minute long shit post.
Yeah.
Okay. You guys in California actually have your own trucker thing happening now, going from California to DC.
Yeah, man. That's I saw that in my anti-vax circles that they've been organizing or trying to organize like a nationwide thing where everyone's like funneling in and going into clogging the major highways and all going to DC kind of thing. So
They're up to 300, and they're in Arizona right now.
oh wow, dang! I haven't been following it still. That's oh my gosh, that is so.
Yeah.
It is so funny. I mean, I'll give it to them. You know, for how crazy some of their stuff is, you know, they do a good job of actually engaging and moving those reps. Let's use the same analogy. You know, they're in there at the town hall meetings constantly. They're taking up school board positions. They're electing people. It's like it's very they're getting involved, and it's kind of. I'm not saying that people are like sitting on our laurels or anything, but you know, we need, I think, to engage eventually. You know, it has to be, we have to all engage. It's kind of like what Bernie Sanders said. It's kind of like, it's a political revolution where everyone needs to get involved at the local level, and it's super productive, and it's a lot more productive than I think people have the idea of. They think national politics and they think just 2 brick walls trying to move one another, but at the local level, it's actually really cares about your party politics because there's a problem and we need to solve it, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, local politics are super important. Oh god, I had a thought, but I lost it. Someone did send me the Ram Ranch though, and I listened to the first 3 seconds of it. So
There you go.
we'll check that out later.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you got the gist.
Yeah.
All right, I think we've pretty much like shot the breeze for an hour. Maddie, I think, will be in here when she's done on the line with one of her clients. We could probably just jump right into Ukraine, Russia if we want, unless we want to have any like
I think we should.
further meta discussion about just the ministry in general, sort of like how we felt the first series of episodes have gone. Any thoughts, considerations for future episodes, stuff like that. So up to you guys.
Good new additions, I gotta say.
I'd like to hear your thoughts, you guys' thoughts on how things are going.
Yeah, I mean,
I think you're doing
I'm
well.
pretty pleased overall. Especially, again, shout out Read and Rap, the homie who makes it all happen. Yeah, it seems like we've gotten a pretty decent like stream of guests so far. I know we've had a bunch of future like panelists / guests, but a lot of extenuating circumstances have prevented them from like routinely being here. I know Freckled Science, for example, like she wanted to be both a guest and a panelist, but then like her dog bit her, she got a blood infection, and then she got COVID, so she's been like in and out of the hospital. Like all sorts of weird shit like that has been
Series of
happening to some
unfortunate
other
events.
people.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think kind of like this is what Reed and Rap and I have kind of been talking about behind the scenes. That we definitely want to like identity-wise diversify the panel by a decent margin, but not sort of in the same vein where it's like the debate bro scene does it, right? Where it's like, I'm going to go find a black person to debate to prove that I'm not racist or something, and then like the black people get driven off the platform. You know, it's, you know, we want to have more broad like ways of thinking, and that's what diversity really ensures, that we have a multitude of perspectives so we can like best synthesize all of that into, you know, future ideas.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of my assessment overall, but pretty pleased so far.
Yeah. My only regret, and I feel safe saying it right now, is our NFT discussion. Marcus knows my thoughts on it.
Hey, I mean, look, you know, shit happens. Like,
Yeah.
it's not really something that, like, I think was, like, totally disastrous, but it's more of a, you know, these things are difficult to, like, explain and communicate. And at the end of the day, if that difficulty was, you know, actually realized on the stream, that only emphasized the need to, like, go dig into it again. And I'll give Sin credit. Like, it was a good faith effort from them to try. Like, it wasn't something that got like derailed because they wanted to ruin it or anything.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, like it was what it was, but it definitely lays out a need for us to do it again.
Yeah, man. I saw your message on Discord, and then so I was like, oh man, what happened? I guess I was expecting, because I've watched all these debate streams and all that kind of stuff, so I'm like expecting something to happen, and I watched it and I was like, oh, it's a good conversation. What happened? What do you mean? So I honestly don't think it was that bad. It's a really, I don't think it was bad at all, actually. So yeah.
Like it wasn't a train wreck by any stretch. So it just might have been like not as, I don't know, clear cut as we would have wanted it to be in terms of like just the back and forth, like question answer. Like it still seemed like there were technical aspects that were kind of bogging it down a little bit, but that's to be expected for an issue that involves a lot of explicitly technical aspects to it.
Yeah, I agree.
Right. I mean, yeah. So what do you think some of the good things have happened over the past several episodes? Or how many? What number
This
of
is 10.
episodes is this?
I think this is
Number
9 or
10.
10.
9 or 10, yeah.
Wow. So over the past 9 or 10 episodes,
I've had fun.
what is the good stuff?
I mean, at least for me, like, I think the good things have been sort of the fact that we're able to at least broach a pretty decent array of issues for, you know, 9 or 10 episodes. It's not like we've been like laser focusing on one thing. That and like having actual people who are knowledgeable in areas that I don't necessarily know about, or people who do different things than me, both within academia and maybe outside of it. I think those are the two like highlights for me. The fact that we've been able to talk about subjects and their, integrations, their tie-ins into, science and scientific thinking. That's been, I think, the most impressive part so far. But
Yeah,
I think that will only accelerate the more we do it and the more people we network with. Great,
what do you think, Graham?
Well, I like meeting people. So being able to see the kind of wide swath of topics that we've been able to engage with, yeah, like kind of Marcus said, showing that there are actually people who are in this space who are willing to go out of their way, take 2 hours out of their Thursday night to explain extremely complicated topics. I think shows that these topics aren't as unapproachable as people kind of think them to be, that these beasts of virology, journalism, sociology, microbiology, that they can be approached with with not only good faith, but with a sense of wanting to bring people into this fold, I suppose would be the best way of putting it.
All right, cool. What about you, Chris?
I mean, I love it all. It's one part social hour, one part kind of intellectual space I thought I would have in grad school, which I guess I kind of had this in grad school, and maybe it's that I miss this, and this is one way I'm recreating it because I'm now part of, I'm part of the system, man. So the grad students here don't want anything to do with me. I mean, they like me, we're cool, but there's a power dynamic, right? So this is kind of cool. As far as it goes, I don't think you'll ever run out of topics to discuss or things to talk about because you have two sociologists, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What about you, Greg? What do you think some of the good stuff has happened over the past 9 or 10 episodes?
Yeah, I think like a really good diversity of topics is good, and I think that what's missing right now in everything is just a more in-depth discussion about primary sources, and I think that that's where like this panel and where we can go, which is talking about primary sources, not reacting to what other people are reacting to, but reading what the actual source is and then discussing that. And I think that that's needed nowadays.
That's pretty good insight, I'd say. The thing that has struck me is the blending of personalities. And every single one of you has a very different style, and I'm included in that. I have a very different style from the rest of you, and yet we all have these conversations for hours at a time, on this platform in this way. That's pretty interesting, and I think that says a lot about how flexible people are and how willing to listen people are, and it gives people as well a way to express themselves in a way that's pretty honest and straightforward. I don't think anybody's trying to pretend or push any agenda of any sort. I'm
pushing the gay agenda.
Well, except that one.
I'm an FBI psyop.
Okay.
That's actually been sent to squelch rebellions. So shit.
We're in a majority here, so we get to set the agenda. So.
True, technically.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Guys are oppressed on this panel.
What? We'll take it under advisement.
Yeah, we'll get back to you in 5 to 10 business days.
Oh no.
But yeah, Bunabun, you bring up a good point. I know Maddie, I think, has mentioned this because she obviously, like Grandma, functions in a lot of like explicitly political circles, like the debate scene, and she's always so like relieved and kind of like content to be here when she's able to be here because she knows it's like a very just genuine circle that isn't trying to like own each other in the free marketplace of ideas constantly. Like we actually just want to like shoot the breeze and talk about some shit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I really found
think-
our conversation with Neurofourier to be super enlightening.
That was a good one.
Like
He's
that
amazing.
conversation to this day I think about.
Dr. Neuro is a wonderful human being, but also like just low-key a beast. Like one, his arms are huge. Two, like his brain is just as big, I think. Like the man just knows so much. He can like communicate and interface with so many different people so like seamlessly and effectively that you can just see him like code switch and transition effortlessly. Like in one breath you could hear him, you know, talk to one of his colleagues on Twitter about science communication, and then, you know, 20 minutes later he's shit posting about Lost Ark on Twitter. Like he's such a versatile person, and it's really cool that he's still like, even, you know, 2 years into COVID, with as busy as he is, like he's still got time to like interface with, you know, the quote unquote common folk. It's awesome to see.
Yeah.
He reminds me of so many gay friends I have had over the years. And I swear to God, if we were in the same town, we would get into so much trouble. Oh my God.
Hey, one day in a less virus laden future, that might be possible.
Yeah.
All I'm going to say is there's a reason I'm not on Facebook. Right? No incriminating evidence.
You're better off, don't worry.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're covering your tracks.
Yeah.
Alrighty, well, yeah, I think Maddie will just expect her any minute. We could probably go ahead and jump right into Ukraine/Russia if we're all queuing up for it. I know, Gremlin, you've been on the grind all today, and I think some portion
Something
of yesterday.
happened.
Are you talking about their medal
today.
count? Are you talking about their medal count in the Olympics? I don't understand. What do you? I don't get it.
I actually haven't paid attention to the Olympics, so I don't actually know what their medal counts are.
Actually, yeah, me neither.
Yeah. I
But
don't know, like, something
honestly,
happened
I-
on my channel this morning. I don't know, like, who put the responsibility of like 80 people sitting in my chat on me, but they made a poor choice.
Dang.
well, hey, I mean, I always
honestly-
say, you know, send me your excess, I'll take them.
Yeah.
I'm the clueless one once again, so I don't even know what's been happening.
Well, I was embroiled in it all morning, so I might actually be able to, you know, for the stuff I do know, be able to bring some kind of information.
Yeah, do you want to
Go for it,
maybe
man.
like take it away, give us sort of like an intro, in case
Okay.
anybody in chat is sort of in the same position as Dr. Bonabun?
Okay, well, from my understanding, Russia, under the orders of Putin, has begun ground and air invasions into parts of the Donbass region of Ukraine. I might be mispronouncing that, but, you know, whatever. At the moment, there is still fighting over the territory surrounding Chernobyl, and I can't remember the name of the second largest city. Chad, do you guys know what the name of it was?
Kiev?
What was that?
Do you mean Kiev?
Kiev is the capital, but the second largest city is to the east of Ukraine, and that is where most of the fighting is happening. There's also troops moving from the north down south from Belarus, and to the north from the south out of Crimea. Odessa is mainly the area that I think, in my opinion, that Putin is trying to take, so that they have complete control over the ports of the Black Sea. My prediction at the moment is that most of the fighting will stop along the river. I don't remember the name of it, because that is like the most strategic way he can do this. I think we're going to see somewhat of like a Stalingrad type situation where we have a big forward operating base put right across the river from the capital of Kiev. That is my prediction right now. The president of Ukraine put out a statement earlier urging the people of Russia to see reason and to recognize that they are, while they are two separate countries, they are culturally, historically, and spiritually tied to one another, and that they do share a common lineage, that they don't have to participate in the unjustifiable militaristic actions. So,
All right. So, question is: has Putin told everybody what his goal is? Is to like take parts of the country for Russia, or to just control Ukraine, or to what's his goal? Does
it's
anybody
hard
know?
to say like what the actual goal is, because we can only like intuit what he said so far. The word denazification has been used, saving has been used, reconstitution of the former Russian Empire is a term that was used as well. So there's kind of a mishmash of goals from what I can tell. It doesn't seem, I mean, strategically, it makes no sense to do any of this. There's no sense. Okay, so you don't want NATO at your border, so you want to take over the country that is bordering NATO countries. Like, it doesn't make sense to do this. I don't think there's anything outside of control over ports of the Black Sea and unrealized gains in oil in Ukraine, because Ukraine does have oil reserved in their country. So like that might literally be it. It's just Black Sea control and unrealized oil.
If he stayed in the eastern part of Ukraine up to the river, and they just kind of stayed there to, under the guise of protecting, the people against whomever,
Mm-hmm.
and they just occupied for a while, what kind of effect would that have?
Well, ethnic displacement being probably the largest one.
Well, I mean, if he started treating people badly, I'm sure there'd be a lot more migration. But if they were just there as occupiers, not really abusing the people who they have such close connections with, if he just stayed there, isn't that enough of a deterrent for NATO to stop expanding into Ukraine?
I mean, I don't. I mean, NATO is a whole other beast. I'm not sure, but like for the example of like Crimea, there was a referendum in 2014 for those who saw themselves as like ethnically Russian. They spoke Russian. They saw themselves as like belonging to that culture and that that way of life. Their referendum is what led to the annexation of Crimea. But for the majority of Ukrainians, they don't see themselves that way. So it would basically like a hostile occupation of their country. So, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, at least like, if the hypothetical situation was that they were occupying solely the east in Luhansk and Donetsk, then yeah, that outcome would be, ethnic displacement, just because, they're essentially like trying to prop up those two regions in eastern Ukraine. Is like they're Russian, they're full of Russians, they've always been Russian, so we're taking them because we're Russia, and these people are Russian, therefore they're ours, and they want to be in Russia. Look, they're shooting off fireworks. They love Russian holidays. See, they're totally celebrating one right now, the day before we start shooting missiles. Like that's
how all wars start, through celebrations.
Literally, yeah. Is that a firework or a hellfire missile? I'm not entirely sure, but you could at least make an argument with Crimea that there were a lot of ethnic Russians and Russian speakers in that area that might have actually wanted to live in Russia, but that doesn't hold true for Donetsk and Luhansk, these two areas in eastern Ukraine, which served as sort of the pretense for the quote-unquote peacekeeping troops to enter right before everything just started to go ham last night into all of today. So it seems like even if we're trying to frame it as solely Ukraine, like in the east, like if they were solely occupying there, that would still preclude some sort of conflict, especially if they're trying to like establish a stranglehold. And Gremlo, the town you were referring to is Melitopol, and that's
you.
like right on the eastern border of Ukraine and Russia. I think that's in Donetsk, if I remember correctly.
I believe so.
So, it all would make sense if the fighting was localized there, but that's not what we're seeing. Like, what wound up happening shortly after those troops actually went into those two like eastern provinces or whatever you would categorize them as in Ukraine is missiles just started flying all over the damn place. Kiev, Donetsk, Luhansk, everywhere you can think of. And then suddenly Belarus started saying, oh, well, we're a vassal state of Russia. Like, we're just going to march right into because we love Russia. They're poggers. And then they're sending troops into Chernobyl, and then there's fighting in Chernobyl. So you got this very, like, arguably like a blitzkrieg style multi-pronged array of missiles being fired, and then troop movements and armor movements from multiple directions. So it seems like this very large disconnect between what Putin was saying and whatever his goals may or may not be, and like the military action that was unfolding.
Yeah. I just still don't understand. Like, there's no prolonged occupation that can happen. The sanctions are going to starve people in Russia. China has opened up grain imports with Russia to kind of soften the blow of the incoming sanctions. But the U.S. sanctions are kind of weak. The sanctions are like, what would be the word? They're like secondary backlash. It's not Putin or the variety of oligarchs that keep him in power that are going to be feeling these sanctions. It's the citizens of Russia that are going to suffer because of it. And it's worth noting that currently there are in 9 cities anti-war protests going on, and more than 1,700 people have been arrested by Russian police forces. So there is a strong contingent of not only on-the-ground civilian protests, but more than 300 Russian officials have come out against the occupation.
And those included some oligarchs, I think, too, right?
Yeah, some of them are. Yeah, but they belong to what we would akin to like a social democratic party.
Got it. Okay.
What would you think would be the appropriate type of sanctions to, deal with
cutting them
like
off from SWIFT first and foremost, because that was one thing that Biden in his address earlier today said that he did not do.
Yeah.
Cutting them off from any kind of assets that they have within the U.S., which they do. There's a lot of Russian oligarchs that have assets in the U.S. Cutting them off from their main source of revenue is the biggest thing. Putin is a pay pig. If he keeps the money rolling in, and then the oligarchs are happy, and ultimately there's no like power structures that are changed. But once he's no longer, the pay pig, then somebody slips something in his McDonald's.
Oh, I happened to get the polonium Happy Meal. Oh dear.
Exactly.
What were the sanctions that were given by the United States this
I
day?
can look them up.
I thought it was like part of at least the banking stuff that was here in you're right, SWIFT there, which is the monetary, like how money flows in and out, right? All the transactions, and without that, then they basically wouldn't be able to trade or do anything without it. I think an interesting point. I think I had read today that in 2014, with the annexation of Crimea, they had said that cutting them off from SWIFT would be a call to war for Russia. So I wonder if that did put any trepidations into that action for the United States.
I mean, certainly. I feel like a lot of the talks we have about like the kinds of militaristic actions that we can take against Russia get lost. We're already doing military actions. We're giving weapons to Ukraine. We're selling weapons to them. That is military action. Cyber warfare, cyber attacks. These are, while it's not as sexy, these are, in a way, militaristic actions. Cutting them off from, let's see, new export controls for Russia, saying semiconductors, computers, telecommunications, information security equipment, lasers, and sensors will be subject to new bans. In addition, 49 Russian military end users were added to a control list. So it seems like a lot of exports are going to be cut off. Also, the Nord Stream 2 was halted by Germany.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm like reading through this. There's other stuff from Japan, Australia, United Kingdom, Canada, and New Zealand, but I don't know exactly what they are. I'm trying to find exactly what the sanctions entailed from them.
Do we have?
I don't know.
Like, while you're go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, sanctions are, they don't make, like I said, they don't make the oligarchs suffer. They make the civilians suffer. So, not exhausting every single diplomatic effort that we could. Like, okay, NATO's not going to be in Ukraine. Like, that's the biggest thing. Like, just do that. And I come from the point of view that NATO shouldn't exist, period. But just off the bat, okay, NATO's not in Ukraine. Big thing, okay? I mean, NATO's not in Ukraine now, but they're invading, so...
Is that the real impetus for all of this? Is NATO expansion into Ukraine?
Well, that's such a loaded question. Like, it's got so much historical context behind it, and you could almost argue that Putin's kind of like using that notion as a pretense for something else too. Like, you could say historically, I think I come from the same background as Gremlo in that NATO should have disbanded after the fall of the Soviet Union, because since then it's been less about stopping Russian incursion, because there was really no, Russian menace to incur because it fell apart. And it grew into this almost like protection racket style setup where, you went to all of the Balkan states and, former Soviet countries and basically said like, hey, just in case the Russians come back, like, we got your back, we got nukes, we got armies, like, we're going to take good care of you. All you have to do is like liberalize your economy, like do a democracy, as long as you like give us all the resources that we want.
Neoliberalism.
Yeah,
so
literally. Neoliberal protection racket is really all it is. When I tried to learn about this, I found an old interview from Chomsky, and funnily enough, in very Chomsky fashion, was identical to every interview he did about this subject. But in learning about what happened in the fall of the Soviet Union during the collapse, was the agreement from Gorbachev that that NATO would not move, quote, 1 inch to the east after the agreement. And the big mistake that I think we can look back and learn from was that it wasn't in writing. It was a gentleman's agreement, because the first action NATO took was immediately moving into East Germany. So I think that historical context is where probably this all begins. But to the question of whether or not NATO is like the crux of it at this point, I don't think so, because NATO's not in Ukraine, and they're invading Ukraine. I don't know.
Yeah,
they're an ally, right? But they're not a member. Is that the technical?
Ally, not a member. Yep.
Yeah, because that was always like the thing that Putin was like propping up, like, NATO incursion right at our doorstep. Like, you want Ukraine to join? We have something to say about that, and there is some, tangible truth in that, right? Like, if we had, Russia building a bunch of military bases and trying to get Canadian provinces to join a military alliance, or Mexico, and even Cuba. I mean, Russia did ally with Cuba at one point, I think, in our history. The U.S. would shit their pants if that was happening on either one of our borders, or somewhere pretty damn close to our contiguous 48 states. So
yeah,
there is an aspect.
We had a whole Bay of Pigs debacle because of it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was remembering. I forgot the name, but I knew there was a thing with Cuba. But like, that notion really wasn't like something imminent. Like, we didn't have any notification that like Ukraine was going to join NATO tomorrow, and then Putin pulled the trigger and said, not on my watch. Like, Ukraine's kind of been waffling like in and out, and even other NATO members weren't sure if they wanted Ukraine because of what's currently happening being a possibility, like that it could happen in the first place. So there was almost like hesitancy from Ukraine and the NATO countries that prevented it from happening sooner. And that's what kind of makes the current military action from Putin a bit more puzzling, right? That wasn't like an imminent thing that was about to happen, right? This has been something he's been wrestling with since, Crimea in 2014. It's been almost 8 years. Like, why now?
Was there something coming out of the Ukraine directed at Russia, that some tensions or hostilities or something that prompted kind of a Russian response?
Well, I watched the hour-long Putin address, and basically, his whole point is that the country is in derelict, no state of repair kind of thing, and you have Jaws leaving the country, and the United States hasn't done anything in order to defend it because they haven't, joined, they haven't done anything to put any arms there, and here they are. They put all this hundreds of billions of dollars into the country, because it used to be a Soviet state. So it's basically they're liberating the people of Ukraine from this oppressive Western oppression.
Yeah. And they did utilize like the very real grievance of hyper nationalist and outright fascist people existing within their military in the form of the Azov Battalion. Like, this was a frustrating thing that I saw prior to the invasion, of people trying to dismiss the very real reality of, the Azov Battalion being an institutionalized battalion within the Ukrainian military. And hyper-nationalist influences within countries like Ukraine is extremely dangerous, and I felt a lot of people were dismissing it as like people trying to scare that their entire military was just a bunch of Nazis. But there we go. Putin did exactly that. Said the entire military was full of them, and we need to denazify Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's where American interventionism and expansionism through NATO kind of come into play, right? Because we've propped up Azov Battalion and other, right-wing ethno-nationalist elements in Ukraine in an effort to wield Ukraine as a knife against Russia and the larger geopolitical struggle between these two large world superpowers. I mean, that's very consistent with what we've done to other governments through the CIA, right? We install a bunch of fascists because other people are thinking about doing a communism, and then we don't want that. We want their resources, and that's not compatible. So we install fascist, and then they're off to the races with death squads and pushing people out of helicopters. So
and that was my initial assessment too. I was like, well, this really just feels like we're doing an Afghanistan 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time too, and this is kind of a little bit of the discourse going on in my chat, part of what concerns me, at least from a materials perspective, I don't have the knowledge to really say from a Russian perspective, or a Putin perspective, perhaps more accurately, whether the material resources in Ukraine and the strategic value exceeds that he would receive from not doing this Nord Stream 2 open trade relationships, the absence of sanctions. To me, that seems so nebulous that it makes less sense that Putin would do this. And I worry that there's some sort of element of autocratic instability where it's all about trying to maintain a stranglehold on power within his country or something, and you have to look strong and take back this very historical territory for his people or something like that.
That was something that someone told me today.
Yeah.
That there is a historical precedent within the Russian history that leaders who do not do some kind of expansionist or show of strength thing are seen as weak leaders and need to be ousted. I don't know if this is a European perspective that I got this from. I don't know if that's something that we can really take into account. I feel like that's a very myopic way of looking at this, that he has to do one last hurrah, for the true Marxist Leninist principles of, definitely state capitalist Russia.
Yeah, because he's not looking like a spring chicken anymore. I saw pictures of him, was like, wow, Putin looks like crap.
I don't know, I think he looks hot.
But he might be out the door, whether it be by age or something else, but the landscape of Russia right now in terms of their oligarchy is a giant contrast to, the Soviet Union, Marxist-Leninism, Tsarist Russia. The current iteration of Russia almost wouldn't necessarily demand something like that of Putin, right? Like you said, he's a pay pig. It's about keeping the oligarchs happy, keeping money flowing through the coffers of the people in power, and letting the citizenry suffer from the lack of infrastructure and functional government entity. But it's incompatible to me with that sort of material framework in trying to keep the oligarchs happy with money in their wallets. That's what concerns me, is that it's incompatible with that kind of analysis. But maybe it is a political thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Putin's only 69 years old, so another 16 years and he can be president of the United States. So.
Zing. Wait, I thought Biden was like 75.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see.
God damn it, Grandma, you ruined his fucking joke.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Why not 95, you know?
The only funny one here.
Never mind. Don't worry, we can leave that out in post. This is what editing's for.
I mean, give him enough adrenochrome and he'll be 59.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's so many elements at play in this. Like, I've, at least in my short lifetime, I don't think I've ever encountered a geopolitical situation that's been so like nuanced and complicated as this one. Like, I think that's what's so profound about this, and the speed at which it's happening. Like, we don't even have time to like learn and catch up to the pace of reality. Like, that's kind of what's a little frightening about it.
Yeah, it feels different. It does feel different, even though, I mean, in my lifetime, I've seen countries fall, and yet here, this one like feels different. I don't know why, but you know, just the media coverage about it and everything. I think maybe it's because it's like a European member, or I don't have no idea.
The thing that I've noticed is there's a lot of speculation on what is and what is not misinformation. Mm-hmm. And I think that may be the difference, because, you know, the Iraq War, that was, you know, largely televised. We kind of had a direct funnel of information, but now there's so many information sources, it's really hard to dissect it all.
Well, that brings me to a question. Is there information that is being withheld by whomever?
There always is, isn't there?
An important player that would change or shape, you know, people's perception of what's going on. I mean, and who's withholding it? Or, you know, I'm asking you to speculate and be conspiracy theorists here, but let's go with it.
I mean, it feels like it's probably being withheld from all directions. I mean, considering how Putin has been talking about this, right? The whole like denazification, the talking about Ukraine, like the whole Donetsk and Luhansk separatist province situation. Like, a lot of it is kind of like pretty transparent. It's like bullshit pretense. And I think people aren't necessarily naive to that. And I think that's where the first source of information is being withheld, as to, you know, the true inner machinations of his mind and what he wants to do with this. You know, that's going to be very difficult to really piece apart without him just, you know, revealing his hand like a supervillain in an anime or something. Mm-hmm. Like, we're never going to get that big reveal moment of this is what Putin was thinking all along. But at the same time, it's also just massively confusing looking at like the American media, how they want to manufacture consent, beat the war drums to continue to justify the military-industrial complex. Like, we're getting a wildly, you know, bombastic, no pun intended, sensationalist impression from the media, right? They're so horny for war that they just want nothing but, you know, Putin bad. He's killing Ukrainian puppies and babies at the same time, devouring them whole like Saturn ate his child. We need to do something right now. Like, that's what it feels like the media is doing to me. And I'm like, okay, like, you're trying to convince me of something clearly, but like, what does the American intelligence know that allows them to be so confident to sort of push this manufacture of consent? Like, what do they know about what Putin wants to do? And that's something that I don't think we're ever going to find out until after this is all said and done, is what our intelligence knew and when our intelligence knew it.
I saw an excellent tweet today about exactly that in the lead up to the invasion, the trepidation, the skepticism that many approached American intelligence with is a direct cause of Iraq. That we saw how flippantly and with such ease people lied us into an unjust war, that we took the exact same like mental approach to this, or a hindsight approach to this, where, well, if it's coming out of the State Department, it's probably bullshit. And apparently not. apparently we're kind of eating our lunch on that one.
Yeah, that's kind of like what I was thinking when some of the initial reports were coming out, was just like, I just want to wait to see it for myself. Again, like it kind of goes back to our philosophy seminar. Like, I don't want to have narratives be shoved down my throat. Like, I want to see the missiles flying. I want to see the explosions. Like, this is, 2022. We have the internet. We can distribute this information more readily from a sort of decentralized source with, random citizens on the ground. And that's exactly what we saw. Like, it was almost a shock, very much something that puts us all in a state of disbelief. Like, we didn't expect it. We have this sort of skeptical mindset of fuck the State Department, but push comes to shove, there are missiles, the airports are getting bombed, like planes are flying through, tanks are rolling in, it's happening.
Yeah, it's crazy that you say that, because I was watching an interview of Ukrainians, and they said the exact same thing, where they were like, it's supposed to be okay. Like, we've been told for days that we don't need to get ready for anything. And then it's just, now it's like absolute panic. And yeah, it's just really sad.
Yeah. Like even the Ukrainian State Department was like, Western media is kind of overblowing this, and it's not really justified in the kind of hype that we're seeing in our supposedly allied nations in their media. And that was the approach I took. I was like, well, I mean, if they're not freaking out, why should I, bang the war drums? Apparently all of us were wrong. Apparently, like, strategy and historical context and, geopolitical theater, like, none of that mattered. Putin was like, no, I'm sending it. I'm going for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of been part of my speculation. Like, Putin wouldn't necessarily do this if either, like, there was some reason that he would want to do it despite the natural response in terms of, sanction and even possible future military action that it would warrant, or if he felt confident that the West was bluffing, they're not going to come to Ukraine's defense, and that he could easily insulate himself from the effect of sanctions and other natural backlash. Like, it almost feels like this is a ducks lined up in a row without anybody knowing he did that kind of moment. He let it all fall, and then the West was caught with their pants down, like we tend to do. And here we are, just kind of like, what's happening?
I mean, Putin seems very good at that, right? He definitely seizes opportunity to either take land, like, for example, in the Arctic, with all the, breaking treaty by treaty, trying to get these trade routes that are going to open up when the Arctic isn't frozen, solid all the time anymore. It's just he seems to constantly know how to take advantage of other countries' lackadaisical, not engaged. I don't know what it is, but he seems to be playing the politics game really well.
I do think we need to, at least on the U.S. side, be in like open talks with China. That while the grain imports are good to ensure that the economy of Russia is not going to utterly just tank and the civilians are going to suffer the most from it, but whatever kind of aid that they're going to provide to Russia, because they are tentative allies, they're not like the most on bedfellows, but they are tentative allies, and we need to keep that in mind. If they're going to do anything to help Russia, we need to ensure that bring them into the fold, like China.
Yeah.
Like, we're beefing, but we can at least be buds.
Yeah, dude. If I've learned anything, it's that the idea of a Russia plus China World War III has scared everyone so shitless that I feel like everyone's afraid of doing anything. I mean, I think Canada is the only country that I've seen that's actually said and is actually saying that they're giving aid to Ukraine and shipping like actually wartime supplies, and I don't see any other country stepping up like that right now.
I know Ukraine asked Israel to lend them some Iron Dome, and they were like, nah, fam, we're not doing that.
Yeah, that's such a big like virtue signal. I mean, maybe I don't like pay enough attention to international geopolitics, but that's a sign that maybe to Putin, like, this was an opportune moment to pull the trigger, right? It was a signal from the Western powers that they didn't actually intend to militarily defend Ukraine and back them up, sort of in the spirit of a NATO agreement, even if Ukraine wasn't a member, right? That's kind of the greater, more broad European concern, right? They have this massive imperialist power like Russia on the move, armed with the world's largest supply of nukes, and they're thinking about expansion. Like they want to start reclaiming those former Soviet states for various reasons, economic and culture or otherwise.
Yeah.
So it's just shocking to me that like the West has talked such a big game, and now here we are. Like we just have to let it happen.
Yeah. Oh, perfect.
Oh wow, perfect timing actually. Yeah, let me focus on unscuffing the video now. It's gonna take some time.
I've dropped the link to Jean Baudrillard's "The Gulf War Did Not Take Place" in your chats. And I was trying to think of what he would say about this.
The Gulf War did not take place.
First time I've heard about this.
So Baudrillard was a postmodern theorist, a real postmodern theorist. And his whole thing was, we live in a, kind of new time where reality is mediated by, reality is mediated by images placed in front of us on TV. And so, like, he could not have predicted social media and all that. And I have no idea what he would say about this. Because he's kind of a shit poster too in the academic sense, and so I'm at a loss for what he would say. He would probably have some kind of really whacked fatalistic approach.
Interesting. I love that there's across all disciplines, the one constant is shit posting.
Yeah.
Keep your dream alive.
Yeah. Also, hi, hello.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
Hi,
was super late. One of my clients who I adore, Sergio Alcabilla, you should, if you live in Hawaii, vote for him because your current representative in Congress is a corporate nightmare. So vote for Sergio. But yeah.
Ooh, you and I need to talk about Gary Chambers sometime.
Oh my God. Oh, we actually are in contact. We're in contact with the Chambers campaign.
They never respond to me.
Really?
Yeah.
We may or may not work with them, but they're a really like hot campaign right now. So I don't know what their appetite's going to be on like taking on a small, letting a small operation do like digital stuff for them. But oh my God, Gary Chambers fucking rules.
Yeah.
He's super
cool cat.
Mm-hmm. I'm jealous that you get to vote for him.
I don't.
But,
he's not my district.
Oh, okay. All good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Sergio Alcabilla, if you're in Hawaii, vote for him. But yeah, because of that, usually I'm in California and I'm used to being 3 hours behind everyone in everything. And so it's nice to have someone like a client who is behind me. The only downside is that my calls are at like 6 p.m. So, but I've missed you guys. I've missed you guys
Welcome
a lot.
back.
Yeah.
I'm liking the hair as well. It's always
Thank
different every time.
Yeah, well, this is actually closer to this is like my natural color, but my hair doesn't curl like this. So I think I'm living my fantasy.
Hell yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We were just talking about Ukraine. Do you have any hot takes?
Jesus. I guess oh my God. I don't have any takes that I think most of the Twitter or the Twitter sphere and the Twitch sphere have covered the bases in terms of like absurd takes. But mine is just that it's really disheartening because I know the people that are going to suffer most from what's going on are the Ukrainian citizens. I don't know that there was a lot more that could have been done to prevent this. I mean, the problem is that Putin's been kind of telegraphing that this was his intent for a long time. And it's driven by this kind of warped nostalgia for a time of like the Soviet Union. I think also one thing I read earlier today that I found interesting was a foreign policy expert who specializes in that region talking about how in the past Putin has been smart with how he's kind of played politics, but in the past few years, his decision making appears to be far more rash. And I found that interesting and worrying. So I'm hoping that there can be a peaceful solution. Obviously, I'm hesitant to say we should send in troops or escalate, because that's playing with fire. But at the same time, I also recognize that sanctions often hurt the working class and people more than they do the ruling class, because the ruling class is somewhat insulated. So it's a complicated situation. But like everyone else, I've been doing a lot of reading up on historical context, because it's simply something it's not my wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was the hard part for me. Like, foreign policy is not like I always say, like, my radicalization point was Iraq, but I've always focused on domestic stuff. So, like, foreign policy is, like, in the most strict sense of the word, foreign to me.
Yeah, I mean, and the problem is that foreign policy in general, it's so region specific, and a lot of the context of like how to deal with certain conflicts is it goes back into like historical conflicts. I mean, we look at what's happening in that region. There have been border disputes for a long time. I mean, we don't have to go that far back in history to see a sovereign nation be invaded. And I don't know, it's so freaking complicated. And it makes me nervous. It makes me nervous. And I bet Ukraine is now really regretting getting rid of their nuclear weapons.
Yeah,
for real.
Yeah. You have them, never get rid of them. It's either going to be Russia or it's going to be America coming after you.
I mean, the two countries that denuclearized and got rid of their nuclear weapons are Libya and Ukraine.
Yeah.
And
for those people that aren't aware, they had the Ukraine after the fall of the Soviet Union. They had the third largest stockpile of nukes in the world, and there was the Budapest Memorandum on Security Assurances, 1994.
Yeah, like it. If anything, it is a great security option, and it keeps your enemies at bay because it's sort of that like mutually assured destruction. But I don't know. And the one thing with Putin that worries me is that because he's showing this more like erratic, rash decision making, I also think, even 5-10 years ago, to think that there are Russian citizens in the street demonstrating against him, knowing that they're endangering themselves, that's not something that I think I would have expected even like a short time ago. And I think that's part of what's driving his decision making, is because he's feeling that ironclad grip on power start to waver. It's still, solid, but I think he's used to basically being an autocrat, like having this sort of totalitarian power over the Russian people for a long time, and enjoying the Russian people's support. Now that that's wavering, I don't know. I think they say the dangerous kind of animal is a dog backed into a corner.
So I mean, I guess that's kind of my question. Like, can we really characterize him as a cornered dog? Because it just feels like, because of his like autocratic nature, right? Like, he wins elections with 99% of the vote. Polonium tea is something that all of his opponents drink. Like, does he really need the support of the people to keep doing what he's doing?
That's a good question.
Well, it's like the sanctions, right? Like, if his oligarchical support is not there and the people are starving, I mean, people don't starve for long, and the rich don't go unpaid for long either.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, they say that he's likely the wealthiest man in the world. Just so much of his wealth is hidden and squirreled away. But I don't know. He still has within his own country the entire like leadership class or whatever, the class of oligarchs are very much supportive of him because he has propped them up. I think they know that you get rid of Putin, that's a massive power vacuum. And there's no guarantee that whoever takes up the mantle is going to be as favorable to their interests. so I think for the time being, just because of how lopsided the wealth inequality is in Russia, and with just how much power is consolidated at the top, I don't see him in any real danger. Like, I don't see his authority really being that threatened. However, should the economic conditions deteriorate to such a point for a lot of those folks who are propping him up, money talks. Like, they are going to do it while it's in their material best interest. Once that isn't as clear or as certain, I think you may start to see some people thinking, well, you know, for my own self-preservation, like, is this really still the right call?
Yeah. I was, when we were doing coverage this morning on it, I was talking to my chat about the Maratist theory that so long as people can buy bread, you know, society is relatively stable. But
yeah,
once they can no longer afford Wonder Bread, things start to fold.
I think now you can extend that to as long as they can buy bread and as long as they can log onto social media, or like as long as they can order something from Amazon. They're like, okay, this is fine. I have enough to where I'm like reasonably comfortable. I think that's why in America you haven't seen mass demonstrations, because people are like, oh, well, I can still consume my media. So
yeah, as
okay.
Felix from Chapo calls it, the treat economy. You know, as long as we get our treats, then as long as we can do the Uber Eats, as long as we can do, you know, 2-day shipping on Amazon, which, by the way, that at this point it's bullshit. 2-day shipping at Amazon. Come on. But as long as we get those little things, because we are a consumer economy, then, you know, society seems stable. But I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows? I mean, it's just heartbreaking. Also, you know what I learned today that I was embarrassed that I didn't know until now? Chernobyl is in Ukraine. I legitimately thought it was in Russia. And yeah, I felt very dumb. I'm like, I have a master's degree and I didn't fucking know this.
Well, Putin agrees with your previous notion, at least.
Yeah.
That is something that scares me, though. The occupation of Chernobyl, at least from a military strategy standpoint, is an excellent place to occupy, to set up a forward operating base, because essentially it's a PvP free zone. If you start doing combat there, then you know, the worst outcome is a nuclear spill, is a nuclear fallout. So
that's true. That's a good point. But yeah, I'm worried. I also think that not only the United States, but most of like Western Europe should start to plan for refugees. And I think that sort of refugee settlement is going to be a major component of where we come out of this overall conflict.
Poland is taking in refugees. They've already agreed.
Awesome. I'm sorry. I've been like out of the loop because I've been on calls. And I feel like this situation changes hour to hour. So I'm already behind.
Yeah. Poland, Quebec, Germany, and I don't think UK, I don't think Boris has agreed to it, but the idea is floated.
Awesome. That's good to hear. That's really a major relief.
Yeah. We kind of talked briefly before you hopped in about like what kind of steps we could have taken prior. I think the only path really forward is like some kind of form of appeasement. You know, there's no like, okay, well, you get this and we get this, and the alternative is war. I don't know. Sanctions don't seem like they're going to have a immediate effect, because they take a while to, you know, see the effects on the economy. I mean, the ruble's already down like 15% or more, I believe. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, what we're seeing, and the reason I believe on SWIFT, it's not a slam dunk to get Russia off of it, is because, I mean, Germany, for example, they went through a massive denuclearization in their energy sector. They rely, like, 50% of their energy and gasoline comes from Russia. 30% of their oil, so just like straight oil, comes from Russia. So when they dismantled their nuclear power plants, they replaced that demand with supply coming in from Russia. That's why the two countries on the council that are potentially going to block that move are both France and Germany. And you normally people would think like, but wait, aren't they like super like liberal and or progressive as far as countries go? Why would they do that? And it's like, you have to remember some context here. So, I mean, I think one thing that we've seen work with curbing corruption in general in Russia and keeping Putin in line has been sanctions similar to the Magnitsky sanctions, which are targeted at individuals rather than Russia as a whole. I think that would likely be the avenue I'd pursue, especially when we're trying to limit fallout for the working class citizens of Russia, because we all know they're the ones that are going to suffer. I mean, when you see their stock market plummet, like, while I think hopefully it sends a message to Putin, I can't help but think of, you know, all the Russian citizens whose pensions just went down the drain, whose life savings or retirement savings that they are relying on go down the drain. I can't help but think of those folks. And so I think, you know, sanctions the way to go. If they can find some sort of diplomatic solution, that's good. I think a lot of outside pressure is going to help. But unless we get the right kind of outside pressure, like China, I don't know. And they're not going to do that. I don't know. All we can hope is that Putin underestimated the abilities and power of the Ukrainian military and overestimated his own military capabilities.
Is anyone talking about China allying with Russia, or like what's going on there?
It seems like you'd be something, or that would be like something to expect, considering, you know, how China's a rising superpower in their own right. They would be fundamentally interested in deposing the U.S. from its, you know, current like status as the global hegemon, like the big bad number one superpower. So it wouldn't surprise me that China would be like, you know, lifting restrictions on Russia, buying more of their shit, in an effort to not necessarily like be best friends with Russia, but sort of enemy of my enemy type deal, where they want to make the West and by extension the U.S. look very weak in, you know, in relation to everything that Putin's doing. Like, you know, China, I think in particular, even I think at the UN Security Council, they were bringing into account, you know, NATO and sort of the more recent rhetoric from like the American media about, you know, how imminent war was. And they basically said like, you know, maybe we wouldn't be seeing military conflict if America wasn't trying to constantly stoke the flames and beat the war drums. And there is some grain of truth in that. Like, we, over the years, or even more recently, like, we still kind of poke and agitate and beat war drums for military industrial complex reasons. And China called that out, I think, for what it is. But at the same time, we can also see that they're just trying to either get under our skin or make us look like shit. So they're not necessarily like people to be trusted completely, you know, undoubtedly. But when they're right, they're right.
Yeah,
that's shitty. Like, we have to realize that sometimes we're the baddies, and this, you know, we contributed in some capacity to this. Obviously, Russia's still responsible for invading and doing what they're doing right now, but we haven't helped.
Yeah. And the rumor mill online is that like, oh well, this is a opportunity because China had planes near Taiwan that, like, you know, China's going to kind of do their own Ukraine with Taiwan right now, and we're going to kind of see like a mirror on their side, and, you know, then the two like communist powers are going to try and like consolidate, which I think is a bit much. I think it's a bit early to make any kind of assumptions like that. So, China. They're...
No, you didn't say it right. China.
I think that China's statement at the UN was as firm as a tentative ally can be against them, because there wasn't like a direct condemnation saying like they need to stop this now, they need to like pull back all the troops, and like this is not, you know, what what we do in the year of our Lord 2022. It was, you know, we want people to respect regional sovereignty. Like, well, how do you feel about, you know, Taiwan then, China?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's like, I mean, God, that's like whenever something would happen in the United States and then Putin would like comment on it and be like, wow, look at you really shouldn't be suppressing your citizens' right. It's like he's saying it, you know, when you're mocking someone, that meme where it's like a camel case where every other letter he's like, you shouldn't be squashing your citizens' dissent. Like, I feel like that's sort of, because it's like with a wink and a nod. I feel like with Taiwan, that's kind of what's happening too. And I've been utterly delighted at all the like, I mean, tankies only exist online, just like so people realize, like they don't exist in real life. And it's just been a delight to watch the cognitive dissonance. I mean, you don't get to see gymnastics like that, mental gymnastics like that in the Olympics, in anything. So like you want to see someone really do an impressive flip in every which direction to justify like why Putin is like actually maybe good, sort of. Go and check out Infrahaz's.
Oh
God.
It's bad. It's bad.
I thought we were talking about a classic Jackson Hink L.
Oh, also, I mean, also shout out to Jackson Hinkle for being a fucking idiot.
Yeah, a socially conservative, economically socialist. You know, so a national socialist. You mean?
Labels have no meaning anymore.
Yeah, true.
They just, he picked him out of a hat and was like, yeah, I'll do that. It's like charades.
True.
Yeah, I mean, you listen to Putin's speeches and you listen to the words that he says, and you start to agree with him. It's just like he does a really good job of talking about the Russian interests and about how Russia's, you know, in a spot because of this, and they're going to defend themselves and this. And if you just believe him and you just go with what he's saying, it's, you know, he's a very good orator.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, that's part of what's kept him in power for as long as he has, because here's the thing with guys who like are leaders who give off that kind of, they play into the strong man
machismo.
Yeah, that machismo thing is that they do it without shame, because they don't have shame about it. What people do, that process is called, they call it myth making, where people essentially like create a myth or mythology in their own head of what that represents and like the rationale for why that guy is doing it. You see the same thing with Trump. It's this psychological phenomena. And I think with Putin, it's epitomized, especially because unlike Trump, Putin's not stupid. Like he's very smart. And he's a good speaker. He has charisma and he knows how to push certain buttons. To certain people, it may seem like, oh, well, it's super transparent. Like, of course I see what he's doing. But like, we also don't live in Russia where every single day, every single media outlet, all the information that's coming towards you is reinforcing that message and has been your entire life.
Well, Russian culture is also all about subtlety and all about subtext, and Americans are not good at reading between the lines, you know?
Yeah, that's why Americans have difficulty watching Chekhov. Chekhov, come on, theater. Guys, read a book.
Read a book,
come on.
Yep.
Christ.
Yeah, I was watching some like...
Support your local theater.
Oh my God. Chekhov's got, like, it's about subtlety and... you know what? I'm gonna give you a required reading.
I was being subtle about how much I liked it, and you weren't picking up on my subtlety.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. I'm the asshole.
Yeah, there was like some like interviewer on the street thing, and it was, you know, the Russians were being interviewed, and it was interesting. They really feel like they're like on the defense here, like they're, you know, Putin's the good guy doing what he can to look out for the interests of Russia. Like, wow, they're not the oppressor at all, and even a chance scenario. So
it's wild. It's just,
aren't we being kind of fed the same thing but in the opposite direction?
One could argue that for sure. I think
we don't have state media though.
Yeah, like given that we are able, or like we have the ability to get our news from various outlets that have different political leanings. Like I think there is a wider variety and accessibility for information and reporting here than maybe is available in Russia. But that isn't to say that like for a lot of our mainstream news outlets, like it's important to contextualize and know, like, well, like Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. Like certain outlets are owned by certain people and interests.
We have a diversity of views, but they're still fairly narrowly constrained. I mean, we don't have out and out voices of socialism on our media. I mean, people advocating for, clearly socialist policies. That doesn't happen in this country.
That's fair. Yeah. At least not in the mainstream.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's. I mean, I think the difference is that one, like, we don't like jail dissident voices like Russia does. We don't have state-owned media like the Russian Times, like Russia does. Yeah. I mean,
for what Chelsea Manning.
Well,
okay.
I'd say we have. Yeah. I'd say we have political prisoners.
In Russia, Chelsea Manning would have just been poisoned, probably.
Yeah, I mean, these are not equivalent, certainly, but we do have, like, to a degree, like, political dissidents, imprisoned or abused or just straight up murdered.
Yeah, we still have Gitmo, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't say our track record with dissidents is anything near stellar.
That's true. I mean, I think
Peltier is still in prison. There's people still in exile from the 70s. Yeah, we bombed an entire neighborhood in Philadelphia in the 1980s. I mean,
and Tulsa.
It's nice to think of ourselves as the good guys, but we have to acknowledge when we're not. And,
totally.
I think that's the hurdle.
I would trust, the media that we have nowadays to be unbiased.
Yeah. I think that was the hurdle leading up to a lot of this that kind of we were talking about earlier, where how Iraq broke our brains and we have such distrust of our media and our institutions that we couldn't like decipher, like, should we be concerned about this, or is this just, the war drums being, drummed?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that we can. Go ahead. I think, the difference for me is that, like, this is kind of why the actual journalism kind of shines here, where it's people on the ground where they're actually looking, and we have, people that are reporters or journalists with the press gear on, and they're risking their lives in order to bring that, those images and a video, and we can have, independent phone camera. Like, I saw some incredible phone images today, like phone videos. I mean, and they corroborate, right? I mean, so they're two independent ideas coming together, and we can kind of see what's actually happening.
Yeah, I think that, like, is a major differentiator, is that during the Iraq War, I mean, that was still before, like, people had smartphones. And I don't know if you remember, like, yeah, you had a camera on your phone, but, like, I don't know if you had one of those flip phones. I did. And that camera, like, you weren't going to make out shit. Like, it had, like,
144p on a good day.
Yeah, it had, like, it got like 3 pixels. It's like you took a picture of something and it would show you what it looks like in Minecraft. And like so that's a difference, right? Is that the people on the ground, are able to record and document things that are happening in real time. And then B, they also have platforms where they can distribute it worldwide, again, in real time, to keep people on top of what's going on. So that factor of having people on the ground locally who can communicate and like report exactly what's happening, that I think sets us up a little bit better than like in the Iraq era, where we were learning about what was happening based on what like the major news organizations were reporting. We didn't really have another method to get information, or like reliable information.
I think that's a good point and interesting.
I remember the lead up to the Iraq War, and I remember explicitly watching the summer before the invasion, or the fall before the no, wait a minute, the summer before the invasion in the following spring, before they even announced an official intention that we're going to, you know, buckle down hard and look real hard and we might go to war with these people. They had already made the decision the summer before. And I remember that because I turned to my mother. We were watching, I don't know, Paula Zahn, I think it was, on CNN or something. And they had this puff piece about H.W. Bush and his glory days as a fighter pilot the summer before the invasion. And I turned to my mother and I said, they've already decided to go to war. They're just buttering us up now. And lo and behold, within a couple months, the intent was clear. They had the excuse, the mushroom cloud excuse, the potential mushroom cloud, and they're off to war. And they had tried it several times previously. You know, he's going to, you know, be a bad guy and he's going to torture his people, or he tortured his people. Yeah. And he had these weapons of mass destruction, these chemical
Yellow
weapons.
cake, all that.
Yeah, Colin Powell's UN
you know,
speech.
The whole, you know, they tried several times until the mushroom cloud struck enough fear in people's hearts to, you know, give them the go-ahead and cow the opposition in Congress.
Yeah.
And, you know, it wasn't that we didn't know. We all knew. It's just that they kept pushing and they found a narrative that would freak enough people out and allow the media to kind of say, oh, well, you know, if that's the case, and then they could run roughshod over the opposition too.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how much of that's going on here.
Well, I mean,
I don't know.
Bring that up, like, it makes me wonder what the contemporary equivalent of that puff piece about H.W. Bush in Iraq is for this. Like, you know, these notions of Putin invading have been pretty much like omnipresent, kind of waxing and waning since Crimea. So, like, you know, what was the signal that like now was going to be the time?
That's right, because we've seen a buildup before on the border, and then nothing really happened, and it kind of fizzled out. I think there were jokes of people that were, what was it? Putin said, like, "Oh no, our soldiers are just on vacation." It's like, fuck you, dude.
I feel like
and like
every year this happens.
Their
So
yearly
it's
vacation.
yeah, when that happens over and over and over again, I guess there are certain like if you want like actual indicators, you could look at like, oh, well, you know, how many supplies, like what supply shipments are coming in at what volume, what frequency, because that would indicate whether or not they're planning for some sort of like extended occupation, whatever. But that's all like, the problem is he does this fucking every year, and then all of a sudden it like he pulls the trigger on it. Like it's tricky. Because then you don't want to waste resources by hyping it up and have it amount to nothing. And I think Putin knows that we can't really do that, because if we respond like that every single time he just lines people up at the border, it's going to appear like he's just like playing us for fools.
Yeah,
I was just going to say this is a particularly interesting historical moment to do this. There's a virus out. There's lots of internal divisions within all the countries. I mean, I wonder if that had something to play with it.
Yeah, dude, what's up with Putin and invading around the Olympics? What the hell, dude? Crimea, now this? Like, it's bitter. It's bitter about their gold medal count or something. I don't know.
Maybe, or the fact that like the entire Russian Federation team was banned from playing under the Russian banner because like they just like everyone dopes. Everyone on their team. They're like, oh, do you not get like a shot in the locker room afterwards? That's weird. Like maybe he's upset about that. Maybe this all just distills down to the Olympics. I think you're onto something.
Maybe.
I mean, when I first heard the U.S. media or our government, Joe Biden, you know, starting to threaten and pump up the, you know, beat the drums of war and that type of stuff, my first thought was, all right, who's needing to get rich off of this? who decided that they needed, more control or more money, and what are they going after?
That is
Yes.
a really good question. Wasn't it like Raytheon and someone else recently were caught basically saying in private communications that like, well, actually war would be really good for us. Like, oh, with impending war, our like revenue, like projections are looking really good. And it's like, I can't imagine something more just like cynical. And I mean, and that's capitalism, I guess, but it's still to be so flippant about this kind of conflict and to see like, well, the upside is that we might make a lot of money.
Yeah, my reaction is like, when do those conversations not happen among Raytheon in their emails? And
Also
Halliburton
fair.
and, and every other defense contractor, Boeing.
Very fair. Very fair.
Well, I mean, that like, going back to that notion that like we don't have, state-run media that kind of functions like RT. Corporations run us pretty much regardless. They don't necessarily have to manifest as like a media or journalistic outlet, but if the defense industry is just pulling the strings from the Western side of things, if the CEO of Raytheon decided he wanted a new Tesla or something and we needed to do some war for that, like if somebody in our sphere needed to get rich, then yeah, it makes me wonder who that would be. But it's still kind of this weird juxtaposition because we're not actually like currently intervening militarily. Like it really makes me wonder how the defense industry is making money off of what's going on, because we're maybe just selling guns. Like maybe that's just the furthest extent of it. Is it just arms sales, or are we doing even more than that to sort of justify all of our saber rattling on our end? Like it's a very curious question, and maybe it's too early in how all of this is unfolding to really have a pretty accurate picture of who's getting rich, but it makes me wonder.
A conspiracy is
Yeah,
that
like,
the
I wonder-
eventual outcome is a Iron Dome situation for Ukraine.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
what's a $200
what I'm
million
saying is
dollars
also
of
I'd
Ukraine?
be-
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
oh no, I mean, it has nothing to do with what I was just going to be like, I would also take a look at like the commodities market and look at, well, what are like Ukraine's main exports. I know actually a lot of IT infrastructure is hosted in Ukraine. So it's not like there's an insignificant amount of economic power that's coming out of that country. But yeah, that was my point. So good addition, Madeline.
I did take a peek at our stock market, and it's in the shitter.
There
Which
is
is kind of interesting.
There is, back in January 23rd, 2022, Reuters was reported that there was a $200 million U.S. defense aid arriving in Ukraine. That's what Gremla was kind of talking about, selling arms to them.
Yeah, I mean,
How many billions?
$200 million worth of 90 tons. This is hard
just
to
a
know.
million, just a little M, no big B.
M's, not B's. Okay.
90 tons of lethal security assistance, ammunition.
Yeah, lethal
love-
assistance.
I was gonna say, I love how they market, like whoever branded that, so smart. It's better than being like murder tools. Like,
I mean,
A plus.
yeah.
Here's how to expedite mass murder.
Yeah.
They're like, no, it's security.
It's healing guns.
Yeah.
Nature is healing with bullets. The bullets are healing
Yeah.
bullets.
I guess I'm just like really surprised
Stop giving Frank Luntz ideas.
yeah, exactly.
Oh, that fucking guy.
Rebrand. Like I guess I'm kind of surprised that like literally no other country is willing to come in and actually fight with them. I mean, that's just kind of odd, I guess. To
Well,
me.
I mean, it's once they do, they're now at war with Russia.
Yeah.
With a nuclear power. Yeah. God, I mean, the problem is that the way that the Western world and like Russia have had like dealt with their conflicts have largely been through proxy wars up until now, because that gives us the luxury of not having to go directly against where it's like we are declaring war on you, but it's like, in Syria, we had it where we were basically on opposing sides in pretty much every freaking conflict. Like that's how it's been. And now because Putin's made this move, all of a sudden it's like, well, are we feeling bold enough to like forego the proxy war thing and actually like
Nobody wants to
face
be at
off
war.
against him?
Nobody wants to be at war
Yeah.
with Russia and China. That
Exactly.
is awful.
Yeah. Seems like it would be foolhardy on China to do anything more than just like the imports that they're doing right now. It's like they're positioning themselves as the the next king of the world, and as far as like economic power. So them possibly slipping up in any kind of like military endeavor against like other global superpowers is not in their favor.
Yeah, I think China will. I would want to. I'm guessing that like they will play with the wait and see approach, because ultimately they're going to back whoever they think is going to win, whoever they think is going to come out on top, unless there's something they can gain in the interim. And if there's nothing really that is there for them to like materially gain, I think they're going to sort of play on the sidelines and sort of like kind of half-heartedly play the both sides thing, where they're like, we're just not going to get involved. We'll put out like a very sort of milquetoast statement condemning violence, but we won't actually change the way we engage with these countries.
Yeah. We should just give Russia back to the Mongols.
Yeah, right? Mongols are badass. They have falconers, like people have hawks and shit. They're nomadic.
Yeah.
Like these people survived in the freaking Siberian tundra. So I don't know. I trust those people
Yeah.
based on the extent of my knowledge of.
I didn't even know like the ethnic diversity that existed within Russia proper until I watched a documentary with Ewan McGregor called The Long Way Round, where he and his best friend from acting school take two BMW motorcycles, go from England, go all the way through Europe, through Russia, take a ferry to Alaska, then go all the way across America, and then take a plane back to England, all
Wow.
on motorcycles. And most of the documentary is their trip through Russia, and I had no idea the kind of cultural and ethnic diversity that existed there.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, most of what we think of Russia is Western Russia. If you look at where like St. Petersburg and Moscow are, they're all in Western Russia, but there's a rich history across the entire country. I mean, actually, they share in the Far East. They share a lot of similarities with like Japan and Korea, and that's to be expected given proximity, right? It's yeah, it's a lot. I know during the Soviet era, there was efforts to sort of create a more like unified Russian identity. And, it's sort of what's a similar thing. Like China is kind of doing the same thing where it's like the I don't know if it's the Han Chinese, but like where they have sort of more of like a central preferred, the ruling party has like a preferred national identity that is linked with one specific like ethnic heritage. And Russia had something similar, but I mean, when you're dealing with that many people across the span of land that gigantic, that massive, you're still going to see a lot of those like regional heritage and those differences culturally come out. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And they also have a fabulous electronic dance music scene, from what I've heard, and a fabulous gay scene
Boom.
that's very underground and very subversive.
Are you talking about Russia?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it
And
has
Ukraine.
to be. Ooh,
Oh, yeah.
love that.
We're big fans of hard bass on my channel.
Oh. I'm working on a book on that right now, right?
What?
What aren't you working on a book on?
I don't know. I actually have a contract for this one, though.
Okay, you're like Zizek. You're just a
Nice.
prolific writer.
Ugh, fuck. I didn't start out this way. Anyway, I don't want to derail. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna
Love
say like
it.
the need to get this thing right with and repair eventually relations with Russia, just because Russia and China have so much land, so that means that they have a lot of rare earth minerals. That's gonna be crucial for solar and electric vehicles. And Russia has so much sway on the Arctic and all the drilling and stuff that we should not be doing in the Arctic, but that we're never going to be doing now apparently because
Yeah.
I mean, they're one of the most like mineral rich countries on earth, and so much of it remains untapped. I mean, even if you're thinking of like aside from fossil fuels and stuff like that, for building the kind of technology that we need to run like electric cars, whatever, that involves minerals and resources that you can only get from drilling in very specific areas. And like Russia as a whole, I mean, it's a treasure trove, and they barely scratched the surface of what they are capable of producing. Yeah, so that's like, it's even if you're just taking the purely cynical, like just looking at the economic impact perspective, we can't like burn that bridge like entirely, right? Like you can go against Putin, but you have to come out of it with some goodwill with the Russian people, so that when Putin eventually, like whether he loses power, whether he dies and the power transitions to someone else, we can reestablish economic and diplomatic relations, because that's going to play a part in our own economic development and growth.
Yeah.
Well,
There
that
is,
kind of invokes like what we were talking about, at least between Greg and I in Discord earlier. The fact that like we've already got so much of a like crippling dependence on Russia, and as far as like the West is concerned, for fossil fuels. You know, we had Nord Stream 2, which is now canceled, but that doesn't stop the EU from purchasing oil and natural gas from Russia while all of this is going on. Like there's such a fundamental need for fossil fuels that Russia can be the aggressor in military conflict and be on the precipice of starting another world war, but we're still such slaves to oil that we're buying it from them. I mean, you could talk about how the U.S. does basically the same thing and has a similar relationship with Saudi Arabia, and how we've collectively ignored what's happening in Yemen for that reason. But there almost seems to be an intrinsically scientific intersection into all of this, and that's our dependence on fossil fuels. Like if we transitioned away from this, we now gain this advantage when it comes to like the international theater and national security, where we are more empowered to respond aggressively and decisively while not looking like hypocrites behind everyone's backs and buying oil and natural gas from the aggressor. Like it's this weird, like we're going to make a smoke and mirrors effect happen. We're going to pretend like we're stopping them with sanctions, and in reality we're still filling their coffers because we have to.
Yeah,
Totally.
It really makes me wish we would have passed that Build Back Better thing, so we would have the things in place so that
Fucking
when times
right.
like this happen, we aren't in such a hard spot.
You know who helped block Build Back Better on the Democrat side? Ed Case, who's running against Sergio Alcabila, Hawaii One congressional campaign. Vote for him, please. Donate to him, please. That's
All my homies hate Ed Case.
Ed Case. He's a blue dog Democrat and was one of the congressmen that was like trying to block Build Back Better. And he comes from one of the bluest districts in the country, and he's a fucking moderate Democrat. We're like, get out of here.
Yeah, I can do
Get out of
better.
here, Ed. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like 12 years ago, there was a huge push by the Department of Defense in order to fund algae biofuels research in order to try to get some national defense safeguards for this entire thing to happen, actually, so that we could actually produce the fuel that we need in order to run our cars here nationally. A lot of those grants dried up and they stopped, but thankfully I did talk to my friend in the Department of Energy, and a lot of that the idea from the federal government is that a lot of that research is now going through the DOE instead. So we have like BETO, which is the algae biofuels national laboratories research. So that is still going on. So that's a good thing.
I don't know a lot about algae biofuels, but I feel like I see headlines every so often about like, no, I know, and it's really exciting. And now, because like, I'm gonna have to look this up and take it more seriously, because that to me seems like we're talking about, you know, the different potential sustainable energy sources. If it's something that we can like actively grow and cultivate, and leverage, that to me seems like a win-win.
Yeah, Greg sold me on it. I mean, he could talk your ear off on it in Discord. This is his
I'm
bread and butter.
I'm somewhat of an algae scientist myself, so.
Okay.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I worked in a biofuels lab.
Sorry, go ahead, Greg.
No, I've research experience in it.
Very cool.
That's kind of like part of why like envision and sort of like this whole Ministry of Science thing, like this almost like a scientist to politician pipeline that we've got going. Like, you know, we can take scientific ideas, normalize them in the political sphere. Like, it seems pretty straightforward. Maybe we could use algae biofuels as our test case.
That'd be cool.
I'd love to know more about algae biofuels. I thought it was going to be a big thing about a decade ago.
Yeah, I mean,
I didn't hear anything more about it.
Yeah, there are a lot of people that are still researching it. A lot of companies that are still researching it. It's just that the grants have kind of like dried up. I mean, the big argument for algae biofuels is basically using the existing infrastructure that we already have for fuel, and just using a renewable energy source as opposed to a fossil fuel that we have right now. So you still have combustion, but you have CO2 coming directly from the atmosphere and then going right back to it. So it's not as bad ecologically as, you know, getting carbon from the ground and putting it into the atmosphere like we're doing. The estimation right now is that about like an algae pond the size of Texas would be able to give us enough actual renewable energy in order to actually fuel all of our cars. So it is doable.
Hey, I'd make that sacrifice.
There you go. That's
you know,
can we just give them Texas?
There you go.
Yeah, I'm willing to make that sacrifice. I don't know about the rest of you.
I mean, it sounds like
can
a
we
lot.
feed Greg Abbott to the algae pond?
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Like, like the den of pigs kind of thing.
Or like give them Florida. It's like basically already an algae pond.
It's true.
So you might as well repurpose
Don't make
it.
me break out the Florida annexation graphic.
We have to update it to include algae.
It's true. There's a lot of cool things about algae, but that's one of the coolest things for biofuels, I think.
Awesome. Very cool.
Let me kind of, I guess, redirect us a little bit back towards the Russia-Ukraine conflict. At least some of the like live updates that I'm seeing, there seems to be another series of missiles being fired at Kiev, and apparently a few of them have actually been like intercepted because they're seeing like shards and shrapnel just like flying through the sky. Biden and NATO are going to meet in the morning, I think at 9 a.m. to discuss like what the next steps are. And I
DM you a report. Where are you? He never messages me, guys. I can find him. There you are. There you go. This is from the Kiev Independent, a independent journalism outlet in Ukraine. 2 residential buildings in Kiev are on fire from intercepted unidentified enemy aircraft. According to the State Emergency Service of Ukraine, there's a risk of demolition. Buildings are on 7A Oshitstia Street. I'll post the link in the ministry only chat as well if you guys want to take a look at it.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Wild.
Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess maybe like to. Oh, sorry. What were you going to say? Something?
Well, I was going to ask a question that it might kind of lead us into a wrap up, and that was, what do you guys imagine would be like the really good or almost perfect peace to come out of all of this? What would peace look like?
Ideally, or like realpolitik, like outcome?
Either or, both.
I like I said earlier, my crystal ball idea right now is like if there's going to be further annexation on the behalf of Russia, it's going to be along the river, and they will basically just claim that as like new territory of Russia or like reclaimed territory of Russia. I mean, like ideally, it would be them pulling out and like paying reparations for damages.
We're going round robin.
Do it.
Yeah, so okay, Russia, you want Ukraine, fine. But and actually we could use this to leverage like a disarmament, right, of US and Russian nuclear forces. We could potentially, right, if I had a magic wand, do a lot of things that could, do some real change, right? But I don't know. I don't know that. My gut instinct is nothing good comes of this period.
Yeah, I guess my nightmare scenario is the Baltic states somehow getting involved, or Article 5 being issued with NATO, and then that just escalating this entire thing into like, World War III kind of scenario. So basically the opposite of that. Somehow us getting on negotiating terms with Putin, saying like, okay, so you got what you wanted, you got Ukraine, so now can we have some type of armistice, or can we have some kind of treaty that can, so we can have some peace in Europe and this area, and probably the US would probably have to withdraw some type of aid or something like that, and I'd be okay with that. But I think it has to deal with, in my opinion, from my vantage point, it seems to be Putin that's driving this as the aggressor. So it's how do we appease him and make him a little bit more level-headed?
Well, there's something to consider though when you say the A word in appeasement, right? Historically, we've done that once before, and look how it turned out.
Yeah.
I kind of agree with Maddie in the sense that like I don't see a resolution to this while Putin's still in power, and I think that's based largely on sort of the irrationality and the rash character of a lot of this decision making. I would hope that our retaliation, at least in the form of the best targeted sanctions we can target at sort of the upper echelon of Russia, somehow manages to drive him down from this continuously escalating series of actions that he's taking. But considering just how brazen this has been in like the last day or two, it makes me a little skeptical that this is even going to deter him. So I hope it doesn't continue to escalate. And I think the only like realistic scenario for peace is either Putin, quote unquote, comes to his senses and withdraws and goes back to the negotiating table. But I think maybe more realistically, he loses power in one way, shape, or form. And once that power vacuum is created, then you're kind of back to like fall of USSR, where it's kind of this feckless entity that needs to get its own shit together internally, and it's not going to be militarily aggressive anymore, or at least for a time.
Yeah. I guess if we're saying like what would be the ideal outcome, my ideal outcome was that Putin will have diarrhea on live television, poop his pants in front of everyone, and that he would have vastly underestimated Ukraine military power and overestimated the will of his troops to see this through, and is embarrassed on the national stage. That to me would be an ideal outcome. Now, is it realistic? Is it likely that'll happen? I don't think
that's my
probably
answer.
not.
I agree.
I don't know how realistic that would be. That would be my ideal scenario, but I think the more likely scenario, what I predict will happen, at this point, I honestly don't know, because it seems to be changing hour to hour. A lot of it is going to depend on whether or not these targeted sanctions reach the right people and touch the right pressure points. And we'll see, because people are now protesting in the streets in Russia. The more this invasion continues, the longer it goes, I think we're going to see more people join those demonstrations, and we'll see if Putin can hold on to power and maintain this momentum when he's getting pressure and dissent from places that normally he has not had to worry about. But I don't know what that means longer term, but I think unfortunately we're going to see a lot of refugees coming out, a lot of violence.
Yeah. I guess partly what I'm afraid of is that they'll do what we did before at the end of World War II, and they take Ukraine like they took Germany and divide it up and have a buffer state against the Russian border and a buffer state against the, Polish and Czech and Hungarian borders, and they just treat it as if it were something that they could control instead of something that was sovereign. And I think that would be a tragedy, but I think that's a real possibility.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Because we tend to do what we've always done, right? And so when we get into these big, huge conflicts like this, what do we have to draw upon? Right? What lessons of history do we have to draw upon? The ones that worked most recently
Yeah,
was
that's
Germany.
a good point. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, right? Because I think, as Greg and I were saying earlier, I'm very much sort of this advocate, and I think in the spirit of John Mearsheimer, and I think to a lesser extent Chomsky, like these two scholars were basically saying Ukraine needs to exist as this like sovereign, neutral buffer state. Like it can't be, co-opted or utilized by either the U.S. or Russia for their interests. Like it just has to be, and that's it. So what you're describing, yeah, if it gets divvied up, then it really loses its ability to self-determine and be sovereign. And now everyone's just trying to pick up as many pieces as they can to suit their agenda. And that sounds like the worst possible outcome, honestly, because the people have no say in that. I mean, what are their lives going to look like when they've been divvied up like pieces on a chessboard?
Yeah, it'd be tragic, but it's certainly not the first time a world superpower has done such a thing.
It's true.
Yeah. Ugh.
And you think about it from the interests that reside with those in power of those superpowers. Their interest is in making sure that their monetary interests get expanded. And so if they have to move a little more slowly for a time, they're willing to make.
Yeah, it'd be interesting if Putin would actually be in it for anything other than the entire country. I guess I never even considered two-state, like the division. I thought he would just be going all the way to the other border and just he wouldn't stop until that. I never considered any other solution or any other option for him.
I mean, I think he's going to go north before he goes west. I think he
those are NATO like members, so.
Yeah.
Then that would be an Article 5 thing. So that would be like a gnarly. That'd be bad.
I mean, they signed in 1996. They signed a binding piece of legislation saying that they would not violate any sovereign border. And
yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier. The Budapest Memorandum. Yeah. It was actually interesting on the Wikipedia. I was reading that when we were talking about that, and it was a Putin's quote and because he was asked like, why you've 2014 you invaded Crimea, which you now have invalidated this memorandum, and he said, quote, "A new state arises, but with this state and in respect to this state, we have not signed any obligatory documents." So he's just saying,
yeah,
I just like he's just so, oh man, he's so twisty. I don't know how to describe it. He just twists everything.
Because he has no shame. Like he will look you straight in the eye and like say, no, gravity doesn't exist. You're an idiot. Like, of course, gravity doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in the context of whatever. And he'll say it with a straight face, and just move on. And like that, he doesn't care about like the truth or that there's like an Article 5. Like, he'll just be like, no, this doesn't count. Like, no, we're not. It's not an invasion. There's no need to have NATO forces counteract it. These are just a bunch of troops on vacation. Yeah. Like, you're the violent one. You're the dictator. It's projection.
I'm rubber. You're glue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let me bring up something interesting from chat. Someone's reminding me the fact that the book. Hang on, what is it called? It is The Foundations of Geopolitics by Alexander Dugin. Yeah. This is basically a Kremlin official wrote a book that more or less like outlines Russia's like foreign policy game plan. And this was written, I think, a long time ago. And people sort of brought this up in the context of like the 2016 Russian meddling and stuff like that. But it does sort of outline too, with respect to like military action. They essentially view Ukraine as this worthless entity. It's not even a state. Like, they're not sovereign. They're not independent. We should just take them to actually make them worthwhile again. But it also brings up this sort of future idea of cutting off the UK from the rest of Europe, incursions into Europe again, destabilizing the US domestically, which they've done a pretty decent job of at least contributing to. So it seems like that might be a piece of reading for anybody who might be curious as to what Russia might be up to next. That book has had some, I'd say, accurate points in it for sure.
I'll have to check it out.
I think, there's probably a PDF of it floating around. Like, it's probably not even something.
I mean, I think about it in like kind of this orchestration of this idea, like it all seems orchestrated from Russia's point of view, and that's what kind of it's like messing with your mind, and that's what kind of like that book talks about. And I think about them when they were saying like, oh, we haven't made up our mind to invade yet. And it's kind of like Dr. Bunwin was talking about. It's like, oh, they're saying, oh, we're weighing it and all that kind of stuff. And apparently they make the decision to invade at like 5 p.m. But then you can look at their watches and it all says like 10:30 a.m. And so then Putin has to like take off his watch and stuff. It's just weird stuff like that. You're like, dude, you got caught,
It's all theater. I mean, it's like he's a master of like political theater.
Exactly.
And making this like charade of we're going to decide on the story and then reverse engineer everything to align with that story, or we're just going to rewrite things and gaslight so that like that's the narrative, we're sticking to it and we're going to plow our way through regardless of how clunky it is. Like it works because they do it over and over and over and over again. And like they've been waging like large propaganda wars forever, and like basically playing off of people's natural psychological instincts to make them question their perception of reality.
Exactly.
Oof, all right, I think this probably feels like a pretty logical stopping point, unless anybody had any other topics they wanted to bring up.
Doom, 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 doom,
Yeah.
doom, 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 doom.
I think
Thank you, Professor Gurr.
Yeah, I think I've exhausted all my Ukraine energy after today.
Yeah, you've been on the Ukraine Russia dole for like 12 hours at least. So go play yourself some Elden Ring, Gremlo.
Oh my god, I'm so excited! That's exactly what I'm about to go do.
All right, let's go around the horn. Shout out either your channels or just I guess closing statements. I'll start with Professor Q since you're first on my screen.
Yeah, I don't got anything to shout out other than this and the philosophy of science course on Sundays at 4 p.m. Central. Yeah, visiting professor at University of Missouri. It's me.
Beautiful. Greg, go ahead.
I've got a YouTube channel. You can go to it by www.thepeer.review. And I stream on Wednesdays on YouTube at 9 p.m. PST. and also at the Philosophy of Science with Dr. Boom, Professor Q, Homozygo, Gremlo, all these people. We're all here again. It's a good time at Philosophy of Science. I like really refreshing take on philosophy, and I've learned more about philosophy than in 3 weeks than I ever thought I could know. So I really appreciate that opportunity.
Is gonna fucking rock too. Thomas Kuhn is
I'm
the
so
shit.
excited. I'm so excited.
Grimlow, go ahead.
Yeah, you guys know where I'm at. You can find me online at www.thepeer.review. And you can also find me, I'm doing gaming streams on a separate channel now. It's just Grimlow GG. We'll be playing some Elden Ring after we wrap up here. So if you're interested in seeing me get really angry and break my brand new controller, then you can come over and check it out.
Dr. Boon, go ahead.
All right, I just want to mention that Gremlow's never told me about his game-only channel, so he obviously
I just made it
doesn't want
today.
to be there.
Oh, brand new,
Cool.
brand
Very
new.
nice.
All right. Well, I'm Dr. Bunabwin. You can find me at Dr. Bunabwin here on Twitch, and I stream in the mornings, 6 to 10 a.m., Tuesday through Friday. And I'm hosting the Philosophy of Science podcast or seminar on Sundays, as several people have already mentioned. So come by and join us. It's fun.
Right on. Maddie, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Maddie Cakes. You can find me on Twitch at MaddieCakes_. You can also find me on Twitter as Madsmaru, MADSMARU. I haven't been streaming as much because I've been very busy with Ragtag Media, which was the digital agency I helped found. So please follow Ragtag Media as well if you want to find some really killer progressive and leftist candidates who are running for Congress, who are running for statewide positions. We're all over the place. And it's where I'm losing years of my life because I'm working really hard for these candidates. So yeah, thanks for having me, guys. This is super fun. I like being like the one non-scientific, non-academic on the panel. It's great.
Am I chopped liver?
Hey, well, you have an air of academia, so maybe
I'll take
give
it.
off that air.
Well researched.
Speaking of academia, Maddie, I have been told by the illustrious Read and Rap to remind you to talk to Josie about a future Ministry of Science appearance.
That's right. That's right. We have to have Josie. She's incredible. And she's a professional researcher. She's the head researcher of the American Trans Alliance. And she's just like fucking incredible. So yes. Thank you, Read and Rap.
Yes, fingers crossed. That would be a very exciting future episode of Ministry of Science. But I think, yeah, we could probably go ahead and call it here. So thank you, everybody, for A, tuning in if you're in chat in our respective chats, and B, for everybody currently in the ministry for being here tonight. Very much appreciate your time and the commentary.